Good morning, everybody. Matthew, can you hear me? And
Yes, I can hear you well. Thank you, Sam.
great. And Johanna, are you online?
Yes, and Granicus should be going.
Okay, let me check Granicus here. I'm not seeing it yet. Okay, let me refresh.
Okay. Go ahead and let me know when you're ready, Sam.
Okay, I'm just checking Granicus. That's my, once I see it's up and running. Come on, sweetie. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Okay, great. Okay, Chair Sabatier, I think if you are ready, Matthew, I think we're ready here too.
Okay, just want to check in with Supervisor Simon and make sure that he's here with us.
And we're also going to be broadcasting on PEG this morning. We have access to do it, just to let you know.
All right, so it is 9 a.m. Today is September 14th, 2021. This is our regular meeting for the Lake County Board of Supervisors. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we will start with a moment of silence. I know that Supervisor Crandall has a moment of silence. Are there any others? I know that I have one as well. Okay, Supervisor Crandall. Oh.
Yeah, Supervisor Sabatier, I do too. Last week, in South County here, I know that we lost two folks. Yes, I would like to do a moment of silence.
Awesome. We'll get to you, and sorry to hear of that news. Go ahead, and Supervisor Crandall, we'll start with you, then Supervisor Simon, and then I'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Yes, I'd like to do a moment of silence for Vicky Robinson. I have an assisted statement constructed by Kuchin Thomas of Kuchin Events and Venue Services, and Vicky Robinson leaves behind her husband, Steve and her son, Tyler. She was the proud owner of Tailored Living Choices, a supportive services to adults with disabilities. And she was a person with a huge heart who made an impact on all her clients and employees, and she'll be greatly missed by all of them.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, last week we did have a couple of passings here in South County. Will Dawson and Don Wade. Both were lost to COVID, and just wanted to have a moment of silence for them.
All right, thank you for that. And over the weekend, we did have 9/11, and we have not had a moment of silence in remembrance of 9/11, so I wanted to make sure and speak on that topic. In 2001, September 11th, 2,997 people lost their lives in the most tragic of ways from a brutal attack on our country. We will never forget the innocent lives that were lost both in the airplanes and in the towers and in the Pentagon. We will never forget the lives of our first responders. While others were running away from the tragedy, they ran into the tragedy to save lives. And we know about the heroism here in Lake County. We see it each and every day. And we are very thankful for our first responders. And we will never also forget the unification that the country felt and exhibited after 9/11, coming together to decide that we were going to stand up against terrorism. And so I just want to have a moment of silence and join the other two moment of silences for my colleagues. Please stand. And if we can please show the flag, Matthew. Supervisor Simon, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, justice and liberty. Oh, excuse me, I messed that up.
Liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I apologize. And liberty and justice for all. Oh man, sorry about that. That's 2 times now.
No worries at all. We're here for each other. Thank you very much, Matthew, for sharing that screen. And let's go ahead and move into our meeting. Number 4, consideration of extra items not appearing on the posted agenda. Are there any items from the supervisors or from staff? Just to remind you, we have a full agenda. All right, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 5, approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that supervisors wish to pull? And I see that, hold on, let's check first with supervisors, anything to pull? And let's go to CAO Hutchinson. I did see her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping we could pull 5.1. I'd like to recommend just a few minor adjustments to it that I think will improve it.
Okay, let's go ahead and pull that item. Let's go ahead and pull the public. Anyone from the public wish to pull an item from our consent agenda for further discussion? And again, if you click on the button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand, or if you're calling via telephone, dial *9, then it will raise your hand and we will go ahead and call on you and unmute you. All right, a hand went up and a hand went down. Let's go ahead and bring it back to the board for action, and we will take 5.1 at a later time when it is convenient. At this point, I want to make sure that we get to our timed items.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to motion to approve items 5.2 through 5.24 on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion from Supervisor Crandall and a second by Supervisor Pyska. Roll call, Johanna, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall,
Yes.
Supervisor Scott,
And Supervisor Scott is absent today.
okay, Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our 6.1 item, 9:05 a.m., public input. If anyone from the public has any comment to make, you have 3 minutes. As long as it is not about anything on our agenda, we will get to our agenda items and you will have the chance to make your public comment then. But if it's not related to any agenda item, go ahead and please raise your hands and we will call on you. And seeing none, let's go ahead and move on and we'll go. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wondered if it would be helpful if I mentioned another item that is a timed item that will be pulled in the event anyone from the public might be waiting for it. You can also announce it again when we get to that time, but I thought it might be helpful if that's okay with you.
I appreciate you bringing that back to my attention. I'd forgotten about that.
It's item 6.7 at 10:30 a.m. It was intended to be a public hearing. Staff is recommending pulling that item today. It will be brought back to you at a future date. We need to meet all of the noticing requirements for that public hearing. And so in the event anybody is waiting, I'm requesting that your board not hear that item today.
Okay, and I believe that, and I'll check with Ms. Grant, that we will still need to at least continue the item when we get to that item, but we will not be taking up the item.
Yes, you can continue the item if staff is not requesting a time and date certain, and it sounds as if notice may have been an issue. It'll just simply have to be renoticed for a future date and time.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and thank you, CAO Hutchinson, for making sure that everybody in the public was aware of that. Let's go ahead and move on to our 6.2, our 9:06 a.m. item, presentation of proclamation designating September 5th through 11th as National Suicide Prevention Week. And I was planning to read it. However, I do see Director Metcalf is here, and this is absolutely related to his department. Wondering if Director Metcalf, if you wanted to read the proclamation or if I can proceed.
Uh, Can you please, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry I don't have it right in front of me. It might take me a couple minutes.
Well, unfortunately, it's not popping up on me either. Let me try something different.
The proclamation?
Yes. If anyone is able to
I got
that
it.
up, please read it.
All right. Okay. Board of Supervisors, County of Lake City, California proclamation. This proclamation for the Lake County Behavioral Health Services recognizes September 5th through the 11th as National Suicide Prevention Week. Whereas this week of September 5th through 11th, 2021 is National Suicide Prevention Week, a time in which individuals, organizations, and communities around the country join their voices to amplify the message that suicide can be prevented. And whereas the past year has presented our communities with challenges and led to transitions that expected or unexpected, welcome or not, can be unsettling, disorienting, and stressful. And whereas the pandemic has changed the fabric of life, and major life changes are environmental risk factors for suicide. And whereas knowing the signs of suicide, finding the words to communicate with someone they are concerned about, and reaching out to local resources. And whereas we know that connecting, working with, and supporting one another can help prepare us for the future. And whereas all Californians are urged to play a role in suicide prevention and promote mental health and wellness as we strive towards zero suicides. And whereas September 5th through 11th recognizes across the United States as Suicide Prevention Week, provides the opportunity to educate our community about the warning signs for suicide, how to reach out to those experiencing an emotional crisis, and connect to resources. Now therefore be it proclaimed by all members of Lake County Board of Supervisors on this 14th day of September 2021 that the week of September 5th through the 11th will be declared Suicide Prevention Week, and that the day of September 10th be declared World Suicide Prevention Day, passed and adopted this 14th day of September 2021.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Director Metcalf, did you wish to speak on this item, to add anything?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you, Supervisor Crandall, for saving me there. Actually, I have Carrie Manning, our Mental Health Services Act team leader, with us here that will accept the proclamation. She oversees our prevention activities in our department, and hoping she might say a couple of words about this. Carrie, are you here? I think I saw you.
So she's... I'm not seeing her on the... There we go. She was moving.
That was weird. I got cut off for a second. I think it's a Monday. Good morning, and thank you so much for presenting the proclamation. And Carrie Manning from Lake County Behavioral Health Services, MHSA team lead. Last week, the prevention staff were out and about in the community and did some sit and chats with different communities. I know here in Lakeport, they went around to different businesses and they were at the farmers market, just trying to get the word out that it's okay to ask somebody if they're thinking about killing themselves. We promoted the candlelight vigil that happened on the 10th, which was Friday. And we are very active out in the schools. One of our goals is to train, as many school personnel and staff as we can with mental health first aid, as well as, giving the kids the teen mental health first aid training. And that is where we teach kids, the signs of mental health issues, substance use, how to talk to somebody about it, and also who they can go to. One piece of that program is that at least 10% of the staff at the school have to be trained in youth mental health first aid, and so those are the first aiders that the youth can go to. this is really exciting for our community. I think that it's going to have a huge impact long term. And then for suicide loss survivors, those left behind after someone dies by suicide, International Day of Loss Survivors is November 20th. And so we're planning to have a candlelight vigil at the park in front of the museum here in Lakeport on that day. So I will send information to all of you, and we'll get that out into the community. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much for all your efforts. I know that it's awkward to have those conversations with people, but as I always say, it's better to be awkward than later on be embarrassed or feel guilty that you never asked or talked or made those questions, because it's easier to deal with it if we just hit it head on.
Yes, it is.
Any further comments from the board before we move on? All right, and want to make sure and open it to the public. Anyone from the public have a comment before we move on? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to our 9:08 a.m. item, presentation of proclamation designated the month of September 2021 as National Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month, which is a perfect segue from our August 31st of Overdose Awareness Day that we had a proclamation for. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this proclamation. Proclamation designated the month of September 2021 as National Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month. Whereas mental health and substance use disorders affect all communities nationwide. With commitment and support, those impacted can embark on a journey of improved health and overall wellness. This September, the focus of National Recovery Month is to celebrate all people who make the journey of recovery possible by embracing the message that people can and do recover every day. And whereas promoting awareness and understanding of recovery from mental health and substance use disorders is essential in reducing barriers and increasing access to treatment. Education and outreach through prevention efforts provides access to resources for those that are seeking support before treatment is needed. And whereas the acknowledgement of the professionals who are dedicated to improving the lives of others is an integral part of the overall success of treatment programs and services. And whereas the impact of mental health and substance use disorders is evident by national data reporting that 9.5 million Americans 18 years of age or older had both a substance use disorder and a mental illness, and 62.2 million Americans had a mental illness and or substance use disorder. It is also apparent in our local community. During the last year, it is estimated that over 400 people access treatment services through behavioral health services. In addition, more than 100 individuals were provided residential and detox services through the support of behavioral health services and partnering providers. And whereas we must encourage relatives and friends of people with substance use disorders to implement preventive measures, recognize the signs of a substance use problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Lake hereby designate the month of September 2021 as National Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month in Lake County and call upon our community to observe this month with compassion and dedication. Passed and adopted this 14th day of September 2021. And I just want to add that this is very personal for me this month. A close friend of mine who I've seen as a mentor to our youth in our community has been a leader in our community, just a stand-up person that everyone would look up to. He unfortunately has fallen prey to the issues of drugs and drug abuse. This is an educated person. This is a person who was in the workforce. It can happen to anyone, and just like the previous proclamation, it's about the support system that everybody has that helps people get through these things. There should not be a stigma against it. There should be help and support to get people back on track as to what they should be doing. I know that's what I'm trying to do on my end, to try and help my friend get back on his feet. And I hope that everyone else would do the same for their family members and friends as well in our community. And Mr. Director Metcalf, if there's anything you wish to add.
Yes, you, Mr. Chair, for reading the proclamation. I actually had that one ready to go, but thank you for reading it. And thank you for your comments. I really do appreciate that. Once again, I'm going to turn this one over to April Gambra. She's our Substance Use Services Program Manager, and I see she's here. I know she probably has a few words to say about this.
I do. Thank you very much, Todd. Hello, Chairman and members of the board. My name is April Gambra. I am a program manager with Lake County Behavioral Health Services. I'm also our county's drug and alcohol program administrator. Chairman, I also want to just acknowledge, I felt, this is very passionate to me. I felt your emotion behind your comments, and I truly appreciate your support and acknowledgement. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I want to thank the members of the board and our director for this opportunity to speak today. The number of individuals served by our department over the course of the last year did not capture all of the individuals that were supported and treated by professionals and family members within our county, or sadly, not even treated at all. Thank you to everyone who continues to be part of the services despite our recent challenges of COVID-19. Our work here is not done. In fact, many would argue that many would argue that with the expansion of drug Medi-Cal, it has only begun. With the opportunities provided through the expansion of drug Medi-Cal services, the organized delivery system, we as a county are able to increase resources and funding to support the needs of individuals within our county. Addiction is a disease for which there is help. During National Recovery Month, let's reinforce the positive message that behavioral health is critical, prevention is effective, and treatment is successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments from supervisors?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, I'd just like to, to highlight that these two proclamations that we've just covered, I served in the military and went to the Operation Iraqi Freedom and came back. None of my soldiers have faltered to that deployment. And I came home, and since then, scores of family members, friends, colleagues, and community members have succumbed to both of these proclamations, just in scores and scores. So I only highlight that because I'm giving an example of me being faced with a wartime situation and surviving it, yet coming home and watching more people falter to these two, alcohol, drugs, and suicide, just in scores, and to this day still happening. So I support any type of recovery, any type of help with that. A lot of family members, friends that are dealing with these things, and so I'm glad that we're honoring this proclamation, and I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any further comments before I open it up for the public? All right, let's go ahead and open it up for the public. Again, please press the button at the bottom of your screen or dial *9 if you're via telephone. Phone 6500. And if we can get phone 6500 unmuted.
Phone 6500, if you can please press *6 to unmute.
Thank you for that. Go for it.
Hello.
It looks like you're yes, it looks like you're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Are you covering subject to IHSS today? I was informed that you covering all the related matter to IHSS today.
So that's
why we are here.
That is in our closed session where it is on 8.1. We do not have that for a public session comment, and we've already passed public comment to discuss anything not on the public session agenda. And so, yes, it is on our agenda, but it will not be for public conversation.
Mr. Chair?
So we don't get chance to express anything?
Actually, before you go into closed session, if a public member wishes to comment, it's advisable to allow.
Oh, I apologize for that mistake. Misspoke. If you wait till we go into closed session, which I believe will probably be later this afternoon, I would suggest anytime between 2 and 3. Depends on the length of the rest of the items, but that if you do wish to make a public comment before we enter closed session, that you will be allowed to do so.
Between 2 and 3, right?
I hope it is. I would leave this meeting playing in the background if it's possible for you to do so. Yeah, that would be the best I can offer.
All right, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And with that, let's go ahead and close this item. And Director Metcalf and your staff, thank you so much for being here with us. These are important proclamations. Next, let's move on to item 6.4, our 9:15 a.m. item. A, presentation on the Canocti project, and B, consideration of permission to proceed with excavating and exploring the Mount Canocti Summit vents. And Supervisor Paiska, this is your item.
So earlier this summer, I was invited by the Canocti project to tour Mount Canocti's vents and hear the history and the legends that has been driving the project for many decades. And I think it's exciting to explore what really could be here. There are ancient legends that talk about a giant cavern, possibly the biggest cavern in the world, and a lake inside our mountain. And I'm excited to have that exploration go forward. But we do, however, need to make sure that the project is reviewed in all the proper ways, and we have CEQA involved, and we have collaboration with our tribal nations. So that's really what I'm asking today, is to get the board's blessing to move ahead with that project with our director, Lars Ewing. So I'll turn it over to him, and he can talk more about the details of that. And if there's any other questions, we can talk about that for a few minutes as well.
Okay. All right. Good morning, Lars Ewing, Public Services Director. Supervisor Paiska summarized it well. I'd like to add one clarifier there, and that is maybe a little bit of history here that work has already been done in the past, 20 years ago, 30 years ago plus, by the Canocti project. When the county purchased a good portion of the property on the mountain, the work stopped, and they've reached back out to us with an interest to start it back up. But the fact that the county is now the landholder there, I felt that it was appropriate that we recommend to the group that they pursue basically a project review going through the California Environmental Quality Act, to ensure that process reviews the cumulative impacts. Supervisor Paiska referenced a few specific components of that, certainly the tribal consultation, but it extends beyond that. So I wanted to just emphasize that, and also to indicate that it wouldn't be the county pursuing this. This is an outside entity that has an interest in doing a project that is on county land. But I'm fairly certain that a portion of it is not on county land, so it's not a county project. So what I would recommend is that they pursue a planning application that would trigger a CEQA review.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Ewing. Anything further before we open it up for the board? No. All right. Any questions or comments from board members? And I know that I had a discussion with Supervisor Paiska, and I think that the title of the agenda item, that approving excavation, I think that is just, the idea is that they're looking to look for things, and in order to look for things, they're going to have to dig or excavate, but that the approval itself would go through the typical process, through planning, through CEQA, and so we are not the ones approving of that action. That action would be approved through a very thorough process that most people that do any kind of excavation would have to go through. But I also wanted to highlight the sensitivity of digging into a very an area of such historical importance to the stewards of our land here, and also digging into the legends as well, I think is a hypersensitive situation. I would love to know more about our mountain, but I want to make sure that we don't cross any lines that we should not be crossing. And I think that with my conversation with Supervisor Paiska, that this group is well aware of this, and we're already involved in conversations with our local tribes in the past. But I just wanted to make sure and highlight those comments because I think that they remain important if this is approved and we move forward. And Supervisor Simon, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, obviously, knowing our history is always very important. So I am in favor of the opportunity to look at the, exploring the events just for Lake County's history, but the very important on the tribal consultation side. As you know, the 7 tribal nations here, that is a very important part of our history. Different names that come with that, different history, different legends that come off the mountain. But it is very important that the tribal consultation definitely does happen as we move forward with that. And just respecting that and hearing that in the presentation makes me feel a little better about moving forward with it, to be able to support it. But that tribal consultation part is very important. As we all know, when you're doing your ceremonies, you're doing your other things, you get to those highest points. Mount Canocti has such deep history with all of our tribes, and I know EJ's probably going to talk some, but there's a lot of history, that goes through that, with that cultural significance of that mountain, for the Middletown Rancheria people and all the people around the lake. That's where Obsidian Man lives. That's where the giant sleeps. There's so many historical just stories that we have of our people in that mountain. So that's what I have to say. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on it, but the consultation is very important.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Crandall, whether you're going to say something or not, you were summoned.
No, it's good. I was going to, so it's good. Yes, no, everything that's been said, I appreciate the emphasis on that. Just thinking about it in general, there's been times when none of that was even considered when it comes to artifacts that come to the local ancestors that we have here. And so, and there's been places where I've been where people, they have the land, they own the land, and they have all of these different artifacts that that they want to do something with. And a lot of people are becoming more cognizant, more caring, more conscious of the fact that that could belong to an ancestor of mine or someone else in the local area. And so very appreciative to see that be considered. And there are different stories from the different tribes locally. I mean, even though there's 7, we all have somewhat of a different dialect or specification as to our belief or stories that have come from those. So this is a very interesting project that will probably help with some of that. So yeah, I wanted to just highlight that.
Thank you very much. Any further comments before I open it up for the public? All right, I see that we have a hand up. Elizabeth Larson from Lake County News. And I see that your microphone is unmuted, but we are not hearing you. So she's asking a question via chat. Who is involved with the Canocti project? Supervisor Paiska or Director Ewing? Do you have a response on that?
So the main representative that has contacted me, and I believe Supervisor Paiska, is Kevin Keeley. He's been the point. I'm not sure who else is involved with the Canocti project, but that's the individual that I've been involved with.
I know that Supervisor Paiska, you mentioned in your agenda item USGS. Is the Canocti project already involved with USGS? Is that who they were working with in the past when they were doing some excavations before it stopped?
They would like to bring USGS back to help with the project.
Okay.
So they're not involved at this time. There's been a fair amount of seismic activity over the past couple of years, so they want to look into that as well with the vents.
All right, thank you. And Elizabeth Larson, if you had some further questions, if you can get the number to call in for the Zoom meeting, that way you might be able to get further questions in. Next, let's go ahead and unmute Pooch and Gary Thomas.
Hear me?
If you can speak a little bit louder, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So yeah, I really appreciate the effort of wanting to with the exploration with the Mount Konocti and everything else in between, and it's not only for this benefit, it also can help educate not myself but everybody else in the county. So I think this is a good opportunity for you guys to go ahead and move forward with this.
Thank you for your comment. And last call for public comment. And we have Ancha B. Nidia. If you can please provide your name, just in case that I accidentally butchered that, and I apologize if I did.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Yes, hi. No, you didn't butcher my name. That is Ansha. I am really sorry. I just got this text and I just tuned in, and I have absolutely no idea what was discussed, but I have a question, and I'm just wondering if it's proper for me to ask it here. It's about...
If it's about the Mount Konocti project, then yes, you can ask. If it's about a different agenda item, then you need to wait till that agenda item comes. And if we've already passed that item, then we've already closed out those items. We haven't really discussed any other items other than proclamations, other than our consent agenda.
Consent agenda.
Are you speaking on Konocti project?
I don't know what it is. I haven't been able to be part of any of this.
So you're going to need to look up our agenda to figure out what items are on the agenda, because I don't want to have a conversation with you to try to figure out how to get you to the right item.
Okay, how do I do that?
If you go to our website, you'll find agenda right on the front page of our website, and then just click on our 9/14 meeting.
Okay, and your website is?
LakeCountyCA.gov.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board for either further deliberation or action.
So if anyone wants to know more about the Konocti project, there's a really long YouTube video. I think it's about an hour. You can search there and get familiar with the history of the project. But there has been some excavation of the summit vent, as Director Ewing talked about and discussed, and it's been a long time since they worked on that, and that vent could be the key to exploring the inside of the mountain. We do want to proceed with the utmost sensitivity with the cultural significance of our mountain, and I don't think that we're approving the excavation today. I think we just want to get consensus, possibly to give permission to the Konocti project to move ahead with to submit their project proposal. Is that what I'm a little bit confused on the motion that we would be making today.
If I could, okay, I would just recommend direction to staff to communicate back to the Konocti project that they should submit the appropriate documentation or application to planning for a project to be reviewed.
So do we need to make that motion, or do we do that by consensus?
That's up to you, either way.
Okay.
It's not required to be a motion. It can just be direction.
Okay. So consensus on direction to have staff respond to the Konocti project.
Looks like you're getting a yes from our comments as well as the nods that we're seeing on Zoom. So I would say that is your consensus.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Direction given.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing it to the board, and thank you, Director Ewing. Okay, if I get my agenda back up here, we're going to move on to our 6.5 9:25 a.m. item, review of and recommendation for cannabis tax usage and expenditure policies and procedures, and CAO Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Boy, we're staying nicely closely.
We're trying.
Very good. I have the pleasure of introducing Patrick Sullivan, our tax administrator, who will present this item to you. Thank you, Patrick.
Good morning. I'm here to present the revised County of Lake cannabis tax usage and expenditure policy. We made a few last-minute changes this morning just to streamline the formatting and clarify a few points. So if it would please your board, I could share a screen just to reflect those changes.
Please.
So this is the proposed revisions that came out of the Cannabis Tax Committee. I'm going to go through the changes that have been made from the last time this was presented to your board just to highlight the distinctions.
Can I ask you to zoom in just a little bit so that it's easier to read?
Sure. Is this good?
Perfect. It's better.
All right. So just to highlight how these categories work, there's the categories that are going to follow below, and some of them are dollar figure allocations that come straight off the top. The others, where you see a percentage, that's going to reflect the percentage of the remaining revenue after those allocated dollar figure categories have already been satisfied. So we can get to that in a minute. The sort of a major change that the committee came up with was how to address the actual funding procedures for these categories. While we've previously had these categories, or many of them, your board was directly considering how to approach allocations within those categories. We're trying to come up with a more streamlined procedure that could allow departments and board members to approach this policy. So the first is how a department head would seek to obtain cannabis funding. The committee's proposal is that the department head could directly approach the Cannabis Tax Committee when it's categories 1 through 4, as we'll get through below. That department head would be able to provide the proposed use, provide sufficient detail on the request and the cost for the committee to make an informed decision. A similar process would occur with the Roadmap Task Force, where there's category number 10 below, where there's a carve out for the Roadmap Task Force. That task force would be responsible for setting those spending decisions there. The second method would be if a board member wished to make a request, because they wouldn't be able to approach the committee directly. The idea would be the board member would bring that request forward. It would be placed on the next available Board of Supervisors agenda. At that point, the board could have a preliminary discussion on the item and determine whether that item should be referred to the committee, and a more in-depth analysis and implementation could be taken through the committee at that point. These same general processes are proposed for category 5, which is CAN grants, and there's some proposed changes to CAN grants. However, since the board has not already allocated funds towards a particular purpose, CAN grants such a general category, it would still come back on the next available Board of Supervisors agenda for final review and approval. So all board members will have an opportunity to see it. At this point, I can run through these categories. Number 1, there were no real changes here. 30% would go to planning, code enforcement, water resources, or environmental health. And again, that's 30% of the remaining balance after those allocations come off down below. Law enforcement, also a 30% allocation for the remaining balance. Economic development, housing and risk reduction, 30%. Youth programs, 10%. There was a small change here. We, during the last board discussion, We broadened this a little bit. We took out some of the other language and left it with a broader definition of youth programs, just to open more opportunity. CAN grants, this is where one of the other substantive changes came out of the committee. Previously, as your board is aware, we have offered application rounds for CAN grants where departments could submit proposals. They had to have a defined budget. This is recommended as a change to that. Our understanding is that it's been hard for certain departments, especially those that don't have a lot of resources, to get out in front of the application process to fully develop a proposal. This allows any department that doesn't fit into one of those categories that's discussed throughout this policy, there would be an opportunity for them to request funding through this process, and that's what that CAN grant allocation would become. And $500,000 is recommended there. Workforce retention development, $3.25 million would be the direct allocation there. Just the other highlight is these funds would be allocated as necessary to offset general fund costs. Board of Supervisors discretionary fund, the $500,000 with the $100,000 allocation by district. There is no recommended change there. The stabilization fund, the difference recommended here is that these funds would also be available to satisfy remaining obligations from CAN grants awarded in the prior fiscal year, or potentially other one-time allocations. There's a lot of projects that have been previously authorized that have not yet actually implemented or spent their funds. So this would be the mechanism to pay for those when they've crossed the fiscal year. If it had been approved by the board last year, it could still be paid for out of this. Capital Improvement and Maintenance Fund, there's no substantive change there. The addition is the Roadmap Task Force for a $1 million allocation. This arose in your board's prior discussion. This would provide funding for the board's designated task force to focus on community revitalization efforts in a designated target area. So that's sort of an overview of the recommended changes that came out of the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have a spreadsheet with a breakdown of how these allocations would work and some of the funding commitments that have already been made, if that's helpful.
Okay. Are there any questions? Do you guys want to see the spreadsheet? I would love to see the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yep, let's go ahead. We're getting a few nods.
All right. Can everyone see this all right?
Perfect.
So this spreadsheet reflects the categories that are in the policy. Over here are the categories. This was the allocations with these numbers off the top. Over here in column I and column J, this is sort of an explanation behind some of the recurring costs and one-time costs that are listed. So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to run through each category or take questions? How do you want to approach this?
I'd say let's go with questions, just because it's similar to the categories you just went over on the actual policy itself, unless other board members wish to go through this in much more detail. Are there any specific questions about what we're looking at here? And so I do have a quick question. It says that
Supervisor Paiska is trying to speak.
Oh, didn't see it. Sorry, Supervisor Paiska.
Thank you. I was just curious about what I don't believe that everything for the 1920 budget was spent down, and if there's carryover in any of these categories. If you could help explain that, Patrick, that'd be great.
Sure, I can get into that a little bit. Yes, a lot of money was not spent, and for example, CAN grants, there's approximately $700,000 remaining in CAN grants that were authorized. where those funds have not been spent. There was also $500,000. I believe your board wished to access the $500,000 allocation for last year as well. So that would also be out there. I can give a rough estimate of what has actually been spent in terms of what we've taken in or what remains. As of, as of last month, there was about 9.4 million still unspent from prior year allocations. But just remember, some of that is already earmarked for these other items. And also the rest of that, what had previously been expressed, a lot of that was going to be used to fill that stabilization fund so that this year's revenue would be available. And I think if you wanted more specifics, I might actually recommend Stephen Carter speak to that as well.
I was just curious about the economic development, housing, and risk reduction category. Was the $400,000 from Middle Creek the biggest cost, right? But didn't Supervisor Simon and I request money for the Risk Reduction Authority from that? And I'm just wondering what was left over.
So I believe that risk reduction spending came out of last fiscal year. Just a moment here. That was the funding for a position, right?
It was $26,000.
$26,000, that's
to
right.
assist the Risk Reduction Authority in hiring a consultant to support their efforts.
Yeah, that was allocated in last fiscal year, I believe. And I don't know that that has actually been spent yet. I'd have to look into that. I know as of last month, $408,000 total in tax expenses had actually been spent, but we're aware that a lot of programs are in the process of submitting their expenses, where they have done work and simply have not billed yet for it, and so that's why that transfer hasn't been made. So I think to get into a deeper accounting of what's unspent, we would probably request further time for research on that.
I do want to say one thing. Sorry, this is Stephen Carter. The Risk Reduction Authority was transferred in May. So Fund 417, which is Risk Reduction Authority, does already have the cash.
Okay.
And how much was how much of that account was not earmarked last year for spending?
Of economic development, housing, and risk reduction. Let's see, again, I probably have to look into it, and I think that may get to a deeper question here of how we were reviewing this, because we were taking most of that money that was left in these categories as we sort of created this new policy to fill that stabilization fund. So this year it's not really operating the way we intend this to work in the future. Because those remaining allocations, where they exist, we were using it to fill that stabilization fund, create that reserve, so that it would be fully funded in the future. We wouldn't have to take the money out.
Or take some new money and put it into the reserve. So basically we created a good base, and now going forward, it would basically carry over like that.
Okay.
I think what would be great, if it's possible, is to get a breakdown since 2018 when we started our cannabis industry and our legal licensing, to kind of get what did we receive in taxes, what did we spend in taxes, and then in 2019, 2020, again, same thing, what did we receive, what did we spend, and then I believe 2021 is when we created this sort of worksheet, so that then we can see not only what did we receive, but what categories were used to spend. And then again, seeing what we have here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're planning to spend with these this policy is all the money that we've collected thus far through 2021, not implementing the money we anticipate to receive in 21-22. That money will be eligible to spend in the following fiscal year. Am I correct with that?
So I think that would be another change. And again, I don't know if Stephen Carter wants to weigh in, but part of part of the change now is that we have satisfied that stabilization fund, which would make funds more readily available. Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on this.
What I believe he's talking about is previously we had to leave it in cannabis for a while because they were able, growers were able to be repaid. That is no longer the case. We don't bill in advance now, we bill in arrears, correct, Patrick? So that's
right.
Not the same scenario to where the money we received this year is pretty much available this year. So this is considered this year's money, and anything that we received in the past has either been spent or is already allocated or is part of the reserve.
Okay, so there's the anticipated accrual of the taxes based on what we know of permits and whatnot, and that will be implemented in these percentages. And if the workforce retention and if the BOS discretionary and all of those that have set amounts and don't get drawn down during that year at all, do they reaccrue the same amount or do they remain? Because I'd like to separate that. I know that we did 200,000 for the board because we didn't have the ability to spend. And there's going to be times where board members are looking to collect more in order to get to a larger project. I think that the deferred maintenance, the roadmap task force, all that, we need to spend those as we get them. But I'd like for some of them to still continue accruing. How do we split that up?
Well, if I could speak to that, I believe going forward, now that this policy is in place, we can track that going forward within each category. So the way it is set up, it would roll over within each category unless some of it was being used to satisfy a stabilization fund if that had to increase in the future. So otherwise, as time goes on here with your board, we could include basically another column in this sheet with more detail about how much was spent and what remains in each allocation.
We can also have like a carryover column and then the new monies and then what's available.
Right. All right.
And that going forward would be much easier because of the fact that we satisfied, that base packing.
Right. What's the other thing that I wanted to ask about? Yeah, if it's possible to get that worksheet to kind of really get the history of what we've collected and what's been spent, just to really see, because I know we see 10 million down here at the bottom for total revenue, but my guesstimate based on our anticipated revenues for today is that it's going to probably be a lot closer to 20.
And I can speak to that as well. When we initially received data from community development on how many permits are out there and what the cultivation square footage is for each one, we billed higher than what ultimately is the true billing, because many cultivators had actually made adjustments. They had phased in. There were issues with getting a state license, for instance, that prevented many people from cultivating. So a lot of tax bills have had to be adjusted. So while we billed a lot higher for the last 2 months, we've basically been making adjustments downward. So that's why we use an estimate of 10 million for the moment, because last year we brought in 8.5 million. We have every reason to believe we would get more than that, but not as much revenue as is actually reflected by the total allocation you would see with CDD.
And then my last comment, sorry, Mr. Carter.
Towards your comment as well, though, Supervisor Sabatier, the reason why those percentages exist is if, let's say, 12 million does come in, you can change that bottom number of 10 to what actually is received, and then all those row 2, 3, 4, 5 would increase availability.
Okay.
10 was what we felt was pretty safe.
Right. And I agree with that is safe. My last comment is on the having to go through the cannabis tax committee. I know that we go through, like, if we want to look at changing some classifications or some wages, that there's the class and comp committee that we go through. But at the same time, there is the ability to just bring it straight to the Board of Supervisors as well. I believe it's an unwritten rule that that's always going to be possible. But I know that we're going to be going from committee to board rather than some other ways. And the committee only has 2 people. And so I want to make sure that that's an understanding that it's always a possibility to bring it to the board if you feel it's really that important, even though you may not have gotten the response that you got from the cannabis tax. Might not mean that you get it through at the board level, but I just want to make sure that that's known and an available avenue just in case. And if we can stop sharing, because I can't see all supervisors and not sure if there's any further questions or comments. Anything further? All right, let's go ahead and open it up for the public. And I see we have a hand up already from Betsy Kahn.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Oh, you muted yourself. We can try that again.
To try that. How are we doing now?
We're doing great. Your internet's a little spotty, but we can hear you.
Well, I'll get closer to the screen and thank you. My name is Betsy Kahn. I have a question about the item that you're reviewing now, which is a policy for the distribution of revenues. Later on today, in your hearing of the final budget, there is an item to discuss the allocations that are recommended. And I attempted yesterday to get clarity on what those column head, the nomenclature for that chart means, but apparently the last column refers to requested allocations, and the one before that is the administration's recommendation for allocations, which is much lower than $10 million for this year. We know that all over marijuana are dropping, and some of the businesses are going out of business. So I'd like to know how you actually determine this billing process and what information is put into that. It does not appear to be in the policy.
So if CAO Hutchinson, Mr. Sullivan, or Mr. Carter have a response for that?
It's through the tax process, and so I'll let Patrick Sullivan speak to that. That is how it's collected.
Yeah, so the basic process behind tax billing here is that our community development department maintains a list of all the projects and permits in the county associated with cannabis, and they all have an assigned square footage that's cultivated. Our cultivation tax is based off of that square footage, so that's how those tax bills are generated. It's using that data from community development with each project, their cultivation being used to generate that tax bill and the balance owed, and that's how ultimately that works. There's also the business tax, which is gross receipts, and business owners that are engaged in a cannabis business submit a quarterly return for that one. So those are the 2 different parts of the tax process here.
Which leads us to the conservative number of $10 million.
Right, because the authorized allocation in the county is higher than that, but our past experience has shown us that that higher number is subject to a lot of different factors that can reduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
I'm also aware of Ms. Kahn's question before, and that answers part of it. But if you look within the report that shows in the budget book, what she's referring to is the admin adjustments final. When it's revenue, it shows as a negative, so we're adding 4.2 million. That's not the final number. That's what we're adding to.
It's 12 million, I believe.
Requested. It's 10.4.
Okay.
So the 10.4 is the actual request, adjusted requested, and that's 10 from tax, and it's 400 from the business.
Okay. Thank you very much for that response. And I see we have a hand up from Director Metcalf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the CAN grants. I see that this round it's sitting at $500,000. Is it still the same as it was the last round, where departments, if they choose to apply, is still at a maximum of $100,000?
What I could say is that the committee didn't settle on any particular recommendation associated with that. There wasn't a restriction of any type discussed. So if it was a department that doesn't fit into one of those other categories and there was a project they wanted to bring forward, they would bring it forward to the committee under the current proposed policy. It would be brought forward and the committee would hear it out. They may request more information. But it wouldn't require an application subject to all of the same restrictions as before. It could be a little less developed.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, CAN grants were put in place in the very beginning of all of this when we had this revenue source coming in and we're still developing more long-term plans for how to use it for all the intended reasons and for community good. And so we really feel that we're at a juncture in this process where the more permanent spending of these funds is taking shape, and so we're looking really to move more away from. We reserve some money for CAN grants, but really to move away from spur of the moment sort of projects and move into long range planning and things that will meet the community's needs long range.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sullivan, but you did say that $700,000 did all 1 million of the 2 CAN grants that we've done. Was it all requested and allocated, or was it not fully allocated?
So that's the change that's reflected here, and that's part of the reason behind the stabilization fund alteration. All of those CAN grants that were authorized by the board and allocated, a lot of those projects have taken longer than anticipated. Those departments are still working on completing their proposal, but they haven't actually necessarily gone to the point where they would have spent that money yet. So that's why that was recommended to be addressed as part of that stabilization fund, since the majority of CAN grant money has not actually been spent yet.
And my question, and I'm sorry if I was not very clear in my question, I remember hearing that we had not received the amount of applications to cover the $500,000. I don't know if that was the first time or the second time. Is that correct? Or
I believe you are correct on the first round. If I recall, it was maybe 465,000. I'd have to go back and verify, but it was a little bit lower. It was in the second round that we had more requests than we initially had authorized the expected funding for.
Okay. Well, I guess my suggestion to Director Metcalf would be, if you don't ask, you definitely won't get. But don't go extreme and to the point that it also slims down where only one person would get the CAN grant for $500,000. Not saying that's impossible, but definitely if you need 120, 110, or whatever the case might be, I would say don't be afraid to ask, because if you don't ask, then the answer is always no.
Good. That's the answer I wanted to hear. Thank you.
I might have gotten myself in trouble, but
no, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I see no further public comment at this moment in time. Bringing it back to the board. Any further comments? I do have one comment. We talked about the stabilization being for 1 year. And I guess my question is very specific about the Middle Creek restoration. Very happy that we allocated those funds, but we all know that in 1 year, the potential of the Army Corps engineer to say, yes, we're doing it, we're going to push, we are pushing, we're having those conversations as we speak, and we are better positioned now with that allocation. But is there a way to formally request to continue for another year? Is there a way that it just doesn't fall off after that year. I don't see anything in there for going further than the 1 year.
So we recognize that that is definitely a concern since it's already happened with other projects, and there would be a mechanism to deal with it. I believe the idea behind this policy was to show sort of how incoming revenue would be spent in a year. So to cover something like Middle Creek, if it wasn't spent this year and those funds needed to be used next year, that money could be rolled into the stabilization fund and paid out of that. Or again, I'd refer to Mr. Carter. I think he may have input on this.
The way I look at it, Supervisor, is basically they've been allocated $800,000. That sticks until either the project is done or the $800,000 is spent. Now, the way you see it on the spreadsheet isn't necessarily an issue, and the reason why is, like he said, it's only allocating technically the new funds. The old funds are still allocated $800,000. Just like the $700,000 for the CAN grants are theoretically, however you want to say it, carried over. They're still allocated for those departments until they finish that project that they were okayed for.
And I think that it would be good for us on an annual basis during our budget process to review what is allocated, because at the same time, we don't want a lot of money to be stuck somewhere and no longer being possible to spend. I think that we do need to have a conversation about what is still hanging versus what is new and what is still actively being worked on. Those are all my comments. Any further comments or action?
So, Mr. Chair, we're looking for a motion today to approve the policy as redrafted with the changes that Patrick used on the share screen as well. And then we will continue at each budget opportunity to convene with the committee beforehand or any other time that is needed, but then bring it forward for your consideration with each budget discussion.
Thank you very much, and thankful for the committee's work.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Supervisor Pyska, second by Supervisor Crandall. Roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6.6, our 9:30 a.m. public hearing item. Consideration of the final recommended budget for fiscal year 21-22 for the County of Lake and special districts governed by the Board of Supervisors. CAO Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephen Carter and I are going to share in this presentation, and we're very excited to be here today presenting your recommended final budget. I am going to touch on some of the aspirations that were reviewed in June when we presented it to you as a recommended budget, and then Stephen will go into the details and really talk numbers and answer any of your questions about numbers and amounts. So, pandemic, wildfire, and power outages. That seems to be the name of the game ongoing for Lake County. But despite all of the complications that those three factors bring, we're still getting the job done. And in particular, when we put a budget together, it's a huge undertaking. And we simply couldn't do it without the support of all the department heads and their key fiscal staff. So the first thing I want to do before we go any further is thank all of them because they're incredibly cooperative, very reasonable to work with, and greatly appreciated by our office. So to touch on some of the highlights that we noted in June and a few other points, things that are ongoing in the county service, I just want to give you a few updates. First of all, I'll speak to the American Rescue Plan Act. As you know, the county is receiving approximately $12.5 million through that act. We've gotten the first half of those funds received already, and the second half will come next spring. And we have a committee that's actively working on plans to spend those funds, and we look forward to coming to your board with some recommendations in October so your board can ultimately solidify that plan. It's a tremendous opportunity for Lake County. I haven't seen anything like this come to us in the many years I've been here. So it's an extraordinary time for you as supervisors to be in leadership and to really be able to make some decisions that can advance Lake County forward in some positive ways. There are a variety of ways you can use those ARPA funds. First and foremost, it's to meet the cost of pandemic response, continuing costs there, but also for infrastructure. One of the things we hope to do is move Lake County forward with broadband coverage needs. And whether or not that's going to happen under the ARPA funds or through another endeavor, because there's a lot of money coming forward for broadband, I do believe that the years are before us where that is going to happen, and we'll be able to make up much of the coverage loss we have in rural Lake County. The Roadmap Task Force, you had a wonderful report from this task force just a couple weeks ago. The pilot project that you envisioned last spring is really coming together. The location has been selected, Clear Lake Oaks, and of course it'll be presented, funded today when you take action on your budget. Then we can get busy filling the positions that will be necessary to actually get rolling. We look forward to that coming together in spring 2022, in early 2022. And assuming it's successful, we'd like to keep these pilot projects going in various locations throughout Lake County where there is a need. The Economic Development Task Force, to some extent, has been on hold pending the arrival of our next Community Development Director. So much of what the Economic Development Task Force is working on is tied to the streamlining of permitting processes, the updating of our various housing and other plans, that we need that individual here and present with us to really move forward in additional ways. So we look forward to reconvening the Economic Development Task Force really soon. Your new CDD director will be on the job October 4th. The Full Circle project, the feasibility study update, as you recall, Congressman Thompson had put forward funding for this project as an earmark for federal funds, and we're told that it is still looking good, and we expect to be able to announce to you as soon as the federal budget is approved that hopefully that project can begin moving forward. Your board had directed that we focus on staff development and training, and several things are happening there and more to come during the coming year. The CSAC Leadership Program has begun again, and we have a number of Lake County enrollees. They are participating along with their counterparts from Mendocino and a few other counties as well. It's happening in Zoom now, but we certainly hope that they can have that in-person connection soon, hopefully in early 2022. And we're also in the process of securing a trainer that can come in and really help us focus on cultural awareness training. So we should have dates for that as well. The project we refer to as the property swap, which is our 18th Avenue property in Clear Lake, being a part of a swap, which would lead to the county taking possession of the armory here in Lakeport, is also still underway. Your board gave me authority to sign documents relative to that project, and there was an updated document which I signed this week, so it is moving forward. We don't have a date that we can project when we will take possession of the armory, but it does look like it is going to happen. The Collier Housing project is also moving along. One of our goals would be to get this to shovel-ready status this year. And so next steps are being taken, and you'll be considering that on an agenda very soon. And then last but not least, we're meeting soon with the Elijah House principals to talk about the possibility of purchasing juvenile hall so that it can be used permanently for homeless housing location, and hope to come back to your board with a proposal for your consideration to make that transaction happen. So a lot going on in the county during an exciting time. And at this point, I will turn it over to Stephen Carter for the details.
Good morning again, board. I wanted to give you a few details of basically like the highlights of the adjustments made between recommended and final recommended budget. But first, I have some final numbers from 2021. The fund balance carryover, or the FBA fund balance available for general fund, actually came in at just over $7 million between 2020, 2021, and 21-22, which is actually quite high. That's one of the higher numbers we've seen in the past history. And the main reason for that is our continued high vacancy rate, but quite a few of our revenues came in a lot higher than expected, and our expenses, or appropriations spent, only increased year over year by about 1.5 million, when a lot more was available. So hit by pandemic, both in the expense side, but revenue side actually increased. And partially due to such a large fund balance carryover, we're recommending that 3.5 million of that carryover be placed into our general fund general reserve to make a new, bring it up from 9 to 12.5 million. And the reason for that is the general recommendations are to have 3 months or 25% of either your revenues or your expenses from the prior year as a reserve for just in case. And that puts us at exactly just under 25% of the 50 million appropriations that were spent last year in general fund alone. So that's a recommendation coming a little later. Property tax, I want to go over a little bit of why the revenue came in higher than expected. Our property tax came in just over $1.1 million higher over the prior year, which was about 4.7% increase. We normally have, the CCPI where it's up to 2% increase, and then any sales and properties that have a higher base for the property tax. So we generally do see an increase, just not necessarily always a 4% increase. It's usually in between 1 and 3, somewhere in there. And then sales tax, actually, the Bradley Burns came in about 1.1 million higher than we have ever seen in the county. There are many reasons for that, but it came in at 4.4 million, which our previous high was about 3.3. So there's part of your 7 million carryover, a little over $1 million there. And then our Prop 172 taxes, which is statewide taxes that we share in, that only went up by 182,000, which means our local area where the Bradley Burns comes in actually saw increased spending versus the whole state seeing massive increases. And then moving on to transient occupancy tax. If you include the TID, which I did in the number in the in the memo, it came in at 1,098,000. Well, if you take out the TID and just include the transient occupancy tax, it was 977,000. Well, that's also the highest I've seen since at least 2002. So even when Canocti was operational. So we had a very, very high transient occupancy tax revenue as well. So quite a few funding sources came in way above any kind of numbers we've seen before. Hopefully that continues, but take that with a grain of salt as well as things level out. And then moving on to requests for positions, additional positions in final budget over recommended. Most of these positions are in the general fund are either absorbed or funded by non-general fund dollars. There is one change I would like to make here. It was brought to my attention that the Roadmap Task Force, I had a misunderstanding. Instead of one code enforcement officer added to the allocation, I would like to change it to 2 code enforcement officers. So the resolution for the position allocation chart would need to have attachment B changed to increase budget unit 2603 from 5 code enforcement officers to 6 to make their total budgeted FTEs 8, and increasing the overall positions to 1,037.95. 0.95 of person's kind of interesting, but part-time employees. And then now, if you don't have any questions about that I'll go into literally the nuts and bolts of the specific changes made. No.
I appreciate you making the statement of the added code enforcement. Thank you for taking my call and discussing that with me and making the change as quickly as you did. I think that's going to be important for the success of the Roadmap Task Force, and looking forward to it. So thank you for that.
Definitely.
So, if there's no further comments, let's go ahead and keep moving forward.
So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but there were 365-ish changes made. I'll go over about 300 of them. No, just kidding. So I'll go over the major changes. Actually, the first one I want to go over is in Budget Unit 1011, Board of Supervisors. Your guys' budget unit, we're requesting to increase it by $100,000 in appropriations. Now, it's a very specific reason. That's for the Community Visioning Forum Facilitation Services. So that's generated from our offices, and that's going to come out of our ongoing, our one-time money of that fund balance carryover as well.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that real quick, I want to make a clarifying point because we have an RFP out for facilitation services right now. And interested bidders have asked us if we have a budget for that. The budget that Stephen is referring to is for all the costs that might be incurred for community visioning, not for a single consultant. So the consultant's cost would come out of that, but it's not all available for the consultant in the event we might have interested parties listening.
And of course, just like all budgets, it's meant to make sure to cover all expenses regarding that. And so it doesn't mean it's going to reach 100,000 for the overall expenses either.
Correct. And as the supervisors who are participating in that effort know, there are more questions than answers right now in terms of what all will be needed for this, but it's an exciting process we're putting together.
Okay. So I'm going to go, sorry.
No, I'd say go.
I didn't hear all that, but I'll continue. So I'm going to go in budget unit order instead of fund order. So the next big change is actually budget unit 1072, which is cannabis fees and taxation. I'm not going to go into it quite a bit, but basically in June, there wasn't the appropriations in available to make the entire 10 million available at any given point in time. The change made increased both the revenue and the appropriations to match the 10 million that we are making available. And also, and any other questions related to that, we already had that item, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but we did the 800,000 for 8109, the Watershed Protection District. The next budget unit would be Budget Unit 1120, non-departmental revenue. Here's where a big change happened, where the American Rescue Plan Act, also known as the SLRFP, state, local, there's two different names for it. We're requesting that all $12,506,226 be, this is also from our auditor controller, Kathy Sitterling, doesn't feel it should be in budget unit 1920. So what we've put in place for your approval or not is to actually transfer it into budget unit 1120, the appropriations as well as the revenue. Everything would be tracked via project code ARP01 and 0203, depending on what the committee decides to spend the funds on. So at any point in time, we can run a report and it gives you every single thing with those project codes and shows you where it's at. And that's why if you looked at the fund summary, general fund exploded expense-wise and between June and now. That's the biggest reason, because that's $12 million in expense right there.
And quick question.
I didn't want to go further because I thought there might be a question.
Yeah, quick question. 1920, just off the top of my head, that's disaster relief. Is that where we were looking to put it originally?
That's where it is currently, disaster response and recovery.
Gotcha. Wasn't there another large item on the revenue and appropriations also, more so than just the 12 million? I thought there was one other large item that I saw in there that I changed.
Well, it's the 3.5 million for reserves.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that was the one.
And that was actually the next one I was going to bring up. So we would move the 3.5 million from the standard budget unit 1120 into Fund 151, which is our general fund general reserve. That's your basically untouchable unless serious, I don't want to say disaster because we've had plenty of disasters. Basically untouchable unless budget time or something very, very bad happens.
Yeah, no, and having up to 3 months now based on what you stated in your memo, I think is a great place for us to be, to feel comfortable.
That makes me feel a lot more comfortable if something happens. And you might have also noticed in Budget Unit 1124, Central Services, the overall appropriations increased by 100,000. What that is there's a brand new account for, we have Cal cards with certain managers throughout the county, and it comes into one Cal card bill. Well, where that's paid from has moved from the auditor's office to Budget Unit 1124. And what the 100,000 is, it will never actually be spent. What it is it's a holding cell. We call it a clearing account. And it has to have it because the original charge will show, instead of being negative, will show like a normal transaction. And then the departments will be charged properly. So it'll be an in and an out. Does that make sense? Okay. And the next one up would be Budget Unit 1451, Register of Voters. So originally the recall election was not funded in any way. So that has changed. So we increased their revenue by $306,000. Yay, the recall election is now funded. So we increased their overall appropriations by $36,000 as well. And so that actually eased some strain on the general fund.
And depending on the results, do we have to pay that back? just kidding.
Possibly, no. Budget unit, moving on, Budget Unit 1904, Information Technology. They're asking for a new capital asset of $150,000, which is the content management system. It's our website, and that would be out of an extraordinary request, so it's one-time money as well, part of that fund balance carryover. And then I don't want to get too weedsy for you, so the next one I wanted to talk about was the Roadmap Task Force itself. So Budget Unit 2201 has increases to payroll and positions, which is offset by a transfer in from Budget Unit 2603. And I'll get to Budget Unit 2603 to explain the other side. But that's why you would see certain line items increase, and it's related to that. As well as we are funding the new PIO position as well, Public Information Officer position there. Budget Unit 2603 is next. So this is where the Roadmap Task Force, you'll see a slew of new appropriations, but you will also see a transfer in from Budget Unit 1072 to fully pay for it. Within Budget Unit 2603, there's a transfer to the Sheriff's Office to pay for those two positions. Right now it's at $795,000. At mid-year, we'll take care of funding that extra code enforcement officer that was just added, and that number will rise by about $60,000. In Budget Unit 2702, between June and now, there has been 4 contracts that have been approved to help that department out with planning services and consultants. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is they're actually general fund, and that was an increase of $182,000 within contracts. But that was approved previously coming from Budget Unit 1072. And then Budget Unit 3011, Road, actually increased $180,000 for FMAG Culvert number 3, $130,000 for Clayton Creek Bridge project. And something I haven't said yet, most of the 365 transactions are just moving within themselves to reorganize to what they feel like it's going to be for the rest of the year. The next one is Budget Unit 3122, Lamson Airport. I was informed that they actually are going to receive an FAA grant, so their revenues are increasing by $32,000 and associated appropriations. That's a good sign. And then Budget Unit 4011, Public Health. They actually requested $300,000 in 6272, which is vehicles, for 2 medical vans. That has been added. That seems like it'd be a very good thing for the county as well.
Can I ask a question on that? Is that being transferred out or with hopes of getting some reimbursements for that? Or is that directly coming out of our funds?
Well, they are not part of general fund. If you mean our funds as public health's state federal funds, currently it's budgeted like it's coming out of their own funds. With, I believe, it's not budgeted, but with the hopes of another funding source.
Okay.
If Denise, the department head, would like to speak to that or not. Is she here?
Yeah, she just unmuted.
Sorry, Stephen, I just stepped away from my computer for a second to handle something. Can you repeat that, please?
So, well, actually, Bruno.
I was just asking the question if there's a chance of getting reimbursement on those vans or if we're paying it completely out of pocket for from public health.
The vans that we want to order, the medical vans, are through a funding source allocation called PHI, Public Health Institute. They're giving us $350,000 for the project. Okay. I need to bring that to your board next week in order to get that approval. As soon as we have the approval, we have 3 months to spend the money. So that's why we've been waiting till budgets were over to bring it to your board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a quick turnaround for actually purchasing a vehicle nowadays.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, it's a very quick turnaround, but I have been in contact with other counties who have bought them, and I have a couple of resources in the state that guarantee a under 3 month turnaround just for this project. So.
Sounds good. Thank you. So the next budget unit up that I'd like to talk about is budget unit 6022, which is the library. They've also received a new grant, an IMLS grant for $75,500. So that increased their revenue. And what the librarian asked me to budget for this is Wi-Fi hotspot devices, Chromebooks with licenses, and services for the Wi-Fi hotspots for 2 years. So that's something that will be good for the county. That is all of the major ones, unless you guys had specific questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I see CAO Hutchinson also unmuted herself.
Yes, I just wanted to wrap up Stephen's presentation by recognizing and thanking Stephen. Stephen and his staff are just incredible. They he refers to it as tying up the budget in a lovely, nice and tidy bow, and it's an enormous process, but we're at the stage now where we're ready to close up that bow and have our marching orders for the fiscal year. And so I just can't thank Stephen and his staff enough for all of what it takes to get to this day. So thank you, Stephen. Great job.
Make me blush.
It definitely doesn't create itself. There's a lot of effort from many different people, including every single department, both department heads and their accounting staff. So definitely thankful for that collaboration to bring us the document that's up before us. I know that I've had all of my questions answered, and I appreciate those that took my questions. I had a whole lot more earlier in June. This is more of the fine tuning of what was brought to us in June. So looking to see if there's any further comments or questions from board members. So I'll make one last comment before opening it up for the public. I recognize that we have, in my opinion, We have more money than the county has ever seen before, whether it's through funding from the federal government and state government because of COVID, whether it's from our increases that we've seen because, again, of COVID, where people were shopping locally and people were trying to purchase properties locally, trying to get out of the more urban and suburban areas. We've seen increases that we've never seen before. We also have some money, such as the cannabis tax dollars that we discussed earlier, more so than we've ever seen before. And I believe we are taking some steps that I am very proud of looking into the future and really trying to figure out what are those big key projects that will change and impact the foundation of what Lake County is for future investment and future economic development. However, I just want to make my comment of, without a full strategic plan, we may not be certain that we are taking the first step that is the first true step that needs to be taken in order for the rest to be easier. And I hope that we can look into the future and continue to build on what we've been working on this year and eventually get to a 5-year strategic plan so that we do have a very concrete idea of what the vision in the future of Lake County will look like. I think we're on that path, and I'm really proud that we're moving forward in that direction. So just wanted to make those final comments, and let's go ahead and open it up to the public for any comments on this item. We have phone 6205. You can please give us your full name.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Thank you so much. This is Bart Levinson. I attended the Middletown Area Town Hall meeting this past week, and an exchange happened between during the meeting between Sheriff Martin and Moke Simon, or exchange in the meeting, and it was about the citizens were asking if there could be more and better notification through the emergency alert systems. And what the sheriff said was that he didn't have the money to do that. And he cited numerous examples of how he was completely unable to do anything further, and told that meeting to simply not expect information. He talked about things like that he already had to pull staff from other parts in his departments, that he didn't have enough people for dispatch. And so to have heard that, and now hear this today about how we have so much money. I recall through the year attending your meetings, all the statements about people saying there aren't enough people for code enforcement, the sheriff saying he doesn't have staff to be able to make calls. I do not understand, and it isn't okay that there be this glaring difference between what you're presenting today and what we are hearing throughout the year in our day-to-day meetings. Something is terribly wrong. We're about to lose our Office of Emergency Services staff. I understand that's under the sheriff. The sheriff is saying he's critically understaffed. We're in fire season. Oh my gosh, how is that going to get handled? People are talking about their neighborhoods being overrun by water trucks going to cannabis grows. We're being told that the community development department doesn't have enough people. The planning department doesn't have enough people. The cannabis people are saying they know that Lake County has never had enough staff. Where is the emphasis on properly staffing Lake County so it can be a well-functioning community? I want to see the focus on that, and instead of a fancy visioning, could we please stick to building the foundation so that we have what it takes in all our departments to operate a successful county that has room for growth? We do not currently have that.
And so I saw that Brian Martin popped up during that conversation, but I do want to offer some words. Within this budget, we've added 7 allocation positions for the Sheriff Department. I know that about a month or so ago, I forget the exact date, 9 new deputies, and I believe 1 or 2 of those were correctional officers, were just sworn in. Some of them are going through the academy, and that doesn't mean 100% that they're going to come through with flying colors and being able to pass all the background and psychological tests and so on. But there's hopes that all 9 of those will be able to settle into a position. There is definitely been some change since we've approved our $10,000 hiring incentive. There are further conversations being had on how to improve retention and recruiting of staff. We will continue to work on those things. And again, I believe we also increased code enforcement by 2 positions just this year. We are looking at those things. We are trying to bolster, and there's definitely an ebb and flow when it comes to staffing, especially unfortunately at this moment in time in our law enforcement. And I do not believe that there are many law enforcement agencies out there that can say that they're not dealing with those problems. It's a universal problem that is occurring across the nation. Even just in our police academies, it's about a quarter of the size of candidates that are entering into our police academies, meaning it's that much higher of a competition to try to get them to come to Lake County versus potentially higher paying areas in the Bay Area or LA. So it's definitely, our task is made more difficult by the changes, and I will say they are cultural changes in how our law enforcement is seen and perceived. I know that we are trying, again, we allocated more positions and we offered higher incentives. We are trying on our end, and I do not believe that we are done. But we do need to bolster our law enforcement and our code enforcement as they do, as you stated, create a foundational system for predictability and stability of an economic development that we're looking to get involved in. And I think we are taking those steps. It's a slow process to see the changes occur based on the steps that we've already taken. And I'll let Sheriff Martin continue on that if he wishes to speak on that.
Thank you very much. Touching on the, and I didn't have this information to share, but if I can do a quick screen share, I just want to address the issue of the notifications. As the board will remember, some time ago, our Everbridge notifications, Nixle notifications, went probably about a year and a half ago to a credit-based system where we could no longer send out unlimited messages for free. The board allocated $25,000 to buy credits. And if I can do a share screen here, I will show you what that looks like on our dashboard. And you'll be able to see just in the month of August of this year, when we had a couple fires, it put us over our limit. This red line here is our limit. So to answer those questions, we want to avoid this by sending out messages for things that are non-emergent. We do have another $10,000, but our $10,000 is probably going to get eaten up really quickly. I think in the course of about 5 messages that we send out, it probably goes through $10,000 worth of credit. So we're working with, I don't know if we're working, I think the state's working with Everbridge to come up with a solution that's statewide that will hopefully address that. But as far as sending out notifications, hopefully this puts it in perspective on what a single month can do to our messaging allocations. With that, our vacancy rates continue to be high. Over the years, I have to look at, I got cut out in a conversation about how many positions were added, but over the years, we've had a bunch of positions cut from the sheriff's office. At one point, I think we were a high of 186 positions. I think there was 168 when I came into office, somewhere around there. We're down to 154. And out of all those, we only have 114 employees working, which works out to about a 26% vacancy rate. So we're still plagued with challenges. We've been doing what we can to try to recruit. A lot of the things that Chair Sabatier said as far as the desire for people to enter a career in law enforcement, culturally, it's not unique for us. We're not experiencing anything different than anywhere else, but we're still competing with those agencies that tend to pay a little bit more. Hopefully some of this money will help us rectify some of that. And it's probably becoming less of an issue with our deputy sheriff positions as it is with our support and clerical staff. The Sheriff's Office and the Office of Emergency Services is probably a minority of the work that we do is actually the patrol work and going out and responding to these calls for service. We also run a public safety answering point, which is commonly known as our 911 center. We're down to 3 dispatchers and 2 supervisors in there, so we're having to move deputy sheriffs. These are all things that I could probably just go back over past year's budgets and explain the staffing issues, and they continue to exist. And we're going to be down to 2. We've had one of our dispatchers announce her resignation effective at the end of this month. So, we still experience high vacancy rates. We're still struggling with filling all of our positions in the county. During that conversation, Supervisor Simon mentioned that there was additional money available. We're still waiting to get our bill from Everbridge on this amount that we've gone over the credits, and we'll use that additional allocation that's been provided to purchase us some more credits. But as you can see, hopefully you saw in that chart there, it doesn't take much to put us over our usage allocations. And as far as staffing, I fully agree. I can't disagree with staffing being a challenge and delivering those services. I've said it year after year that we're in the business of providing services, and if we don't have people, all the technology, all the tools are great, but if you don't have people to deliver those services, we can't accomplish our mission to provide services to the people of Lake County. I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability at this point.
I will add one more thing about the alerts. I know that, for example, let's talk about the cash fire. The life-saving maneuvers between law enforcement and fire districts was absolutely amazing. To alert those that aren't in the vicinity, I think is what's really costing us a lot of money, because a lot of people are activating themselves to receive these messages so that they can be in the know. And I think it ends up costing us more to alert those that are not necessarily right in the path of the fire versus just activating an alert to those that are literally in the path of the fire. And I think that we have to be patient with information. If we're not in danger, if we are in danger, we will be told that we're in danger. But I think everybody wants to know everything. And I know people here in Lake County that are signed up with Napa Nixles or Mendocino Nixles. And all those things cost money. And so I think that we need to do a better job of being responsible also with the services that are available so that we don't overuse those services just so we can feel comfortable because we have knowledge of what's happening. I think that our first responders are doing their job to ensure the safety of everybody who is in harm's way. And I think that we need to try to be patient sometimes with the information. I know it feels better when you have it, but at the same time, it's at the detriment of the funding that is available. And Supervisor Pyska?
So I just want to remind the caller also, when we were talking about our cannabis fund, that we are committing $3.25 million of the cannabis revenue this year to bolster our staff and to go into workforce development and salary. So, this is a commitment that we're making, and we're working towards those goals. So I just wanted to remind the public and anybody that's watching that we just had that conversation.
Okay. And just want to make sure, since Supervisor Simon, your name was mentioned, if you wanted to make a comment.
No, I appreciated Brian coming to the Middletown area town hall. A lot of questions, obviously, on the Nix one. Just as you pointed out, Supervisor Sabatier, we do have folks that are signed up, especially in the South County on Napa. And, definitely Napa sends out a lot of nixels. So people get those in this area. If there's a red flag warning, tree blocking the road, quite a few things come out on there. So, I appreciated the sheriff coming down and sharing the information with how many folks do get the messages throughout the county on the incidences. But I know when we did have discussion, when it came for in June, when we talked about it, I know the board and I know myself, I mentioned that, if we need to increase that budget, that we'd be willing to have that conversation. The sheriff would bring that back to us. So, I think that would be one thing. We have probably heard that from a lot of different communities members in each district. So it's something that our community and our constituents are looking for. So, you know, that was a conversation that was had, and I appreciate Jessica pointing out, and also Carol and Stephen pointing out that this is a budget unlike anything we've ever had. We as a board need to continue in our process of really looking at strengthening our workforce here in Lake County to take care of the constituents as we move forward. It's been said multiple times, we haven't had an opportunity like we have now, and the time is now for us to continue on to work as a board to strengthen the workforce for Lake County, to give our constituents what they need. And this budget is a step in that direction, and we got work to do. If we're sitting here having the same conversation next year, I definitely understand the frustration from the community, but I see us as a board moving in a positive direction with the funds that we have to make sure that we're strengthening the workforce to improve the lives over the next decade for this community in this county.
Thank you, Supervisor. Let's go ahead and move on in public comment to Betsy Kahn.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. This is Betsy Kahn. I would like to say that in all of the discussions, the only thing I disagree with, and I disagree with strongly, is the sense that we do not have the money to put into providing public information. If you recall, the August 18th fire happened in the middle of the day when many people leave the city of Clear Lake and go to other locations to work, many of them the employees of the county. The insufficiency of the information system, such as not having enough money to provide nixle alerts, is absurd. Given that you have this funding, and I agree with all of you that yes, you're doing everything you possibly can, please stop shortchanging the public. I hope that when we have a new public information officer, and that public information officer does have the qualifications to serve under the FEMA emergency service functions, that particular individual will be able to articulate the needs for much improved public information. But right now, this is insufficient, and each other. We use Facebook tremendously to each other's support, but we need you to stop looking at this like a little faucet with a drip. It's got to be information available for everybody to understand. So please take that into consideration. It's so amazingly difficult.
Thank you for your comment. Phone 6205. I believe this is a repeat.
Open.
If it's a repeat, if you can be succinct.
Yes, this is not a repeat. On KPFC, the local community radio station, during the Cache Fire, there were many phone calls from people asking urgently for information. They didn't know their zone. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know what roads were closed. I'd like to tell you about one in particular call, actually two. One was from a gentleman, the father, the family. He had the family vehicle. He was somewhere else in the county doing his job, and his wife, children, and pets were in the Cache Fire zone, and he didn't know how to get in there to retrieve his family, and he had their only car. We can never know where people are and what they need. That is why you do need to broadcast the information widely. You cannot decide that you know ahead exactly the area that people need to know and that you've got that all covered. You don't. There was another call from a person who was a county employee valiantly trying to not leave their post, had a home inside the Cache Fire area with dogs, and was putting a plea out to the public for somebody to please be able to find a way to get in to rescue her dogs when we already knew the roads were closed. We need the information, and since you have the budgeting, please, I agree with Betsy Kahn. You've been leaving us out. Please include us. The Zone Haven rollout has gone in the tiniest pieces. I understand all the departments have been working on this for a year, and that you all have gotten trained, but the public hasn't even. If we can make sure to just stick to the budget. Talking about Zone Haven is not part of the budget. If you just want to say we need to put more money, then we could talk about that. But we're not discussing the internal workings of Zone Haven at this moment. Well, it goes to, I hear the sheriff not being sure that he has enough money to do what he needs to do to care for the county. And I just want to repeat what Supervisor Simon or Supervisor Pyska just mentioned. We just approved $3.2 million available to law enforcement. It doesn't state any specifics of how it should be used. And that's absolutely some funding that could be used for that. So I think that it's available if it's required to be used. I look forward to hearing whether that's enough money. Sure hope 3.2 million. CEO Hutchinson?
Yeah, I just think there's some confusion here. When Stephen Carter was giving the position report earlier, he mentioned a public information officer. He didn't say that position was for the sheriff department, but it is. It came to you earlier through the class and comp committee. So the sheriff is getting a public information officer position this year. He's also getting additional law enforcement positions, which have already been reviewed. And we are poised to put additional funding into the cost of nixles as it is needed. So those are the facts relative to some of this.
All right, thank you for that. And it looks like we have no further public comment. And so, Mr. Carter, are you done with your presentation? I believe you are, since we opened it up for public comment. Any further comments or questions from board members before we take action? And I just want to remind that action would require the amendment of the position allocation as stated by Mr. Carter earlier. And I know there's a couple resolutions.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add, I know with the last comments, the series of comments, just to kind of highlight the roadmap task force involving some of the funding going to the sheriffs, and I know it's been mentioned, but I also would like to highlight too that in the cannabis budget, where at one time it was 7.5% allocation, now it's I noticed it was 30%. So the board is doing what they can to assist the sheriff with what he needs, and so I just wanted her to just to highlight that as well, because a lot of other things were said. So I wanted to, I know it's last subject that we talked about, but it involves funding. I wanted to make sure that she knew that and heard that as well. Because I had to explain that at one of my town halls where the sheriff and his department has been explaining different things about emergencies and whatnot as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. So
thank you for that. Looking for a resolution adopting final recommended budget.
I'll offer the resolution.
Resolution has been offered by Supervisor Crandall. Johanna, roll call, please. Okay, and just before everybody votes, and I'm sorry to interrupt, this does require a 4/5 vote, I believe, for the final recommended budget.
Okay, Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Thank you.
And looking for a resolution to be offered for position allocation resolution for adopted budget 21-22 with amendments as stated by Mr. Carter.
I'll offer the resolution.
Go ahead, Mo.
Resolution has been offered by Supervisor Simon.
Yes.
Okay.
Johanna, roll call, please.
Simon. All right, Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
And Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Thank you.
And I'm looking at Mr. Carter and CEO Hutchinson. I believe that completes our item for the final budget. Again, thank you for all the hard work. This is something that starts back in March and April. This is a long time coming to get all the way here. Is there one more?
Final action is to approve continuation of the informal hiring freeze for general fund departments, delegating authority to the county administrative officer to waive as appropriate. And that would be my motion only.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Pyska, second by Supervisor Simon. Roll call, please. Johanna.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Thank you.
And I am going to skip item 6.7. We'll come back to that just to have that brief discussion about continuing that. Let's go ahead and go straight to our 6.8, 10:40 a.m. item, consideration of update on COVID-19. And today with us, we have Dr. Charlie Evans. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be back. And thank you to members of the board and residents of Lake County. It's been 8 weeks since I spoke to you last. I had a successful mission to Kenya, who also struggles with their fight against the pandemic. A lot has happened here in the last 8 weeks, and I'd like to start. I believe you have a presentation from Sarah on the epidemiology report.
Yes, if we can get that share screen to play, and then we'll go ahead and continue after that.
Thank you.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. This is Sarah Marikis with the COVID epidemiology update. It is September 13th, the afternoon of September 13th, recording this for you for the morning of September 14th. I'm going to share the latest data on testing, test positivity, cases, and COVID deaths among Lake County residents and the progress that's being made towards vaccination coverage. The graph on the left shows us the tests per 100,000 in the county in the black line and the state in the gray line. From here you can see that Lake County over the latter half of the summer tested at fairly significant levels for Lake County, above 400 per 100,000. The only other time we saw testing at those levels was during the winter surge. The state is testing at a higher rate. However, in Lake County, we're seeing a higher testing positivity than the state in the gray here. Testing positivity has remained high in Lake County, ranging from 13% where it is right now to up to about 17, 18% earlier in the summer. We have nearly 5,800 confirmed cases in Lake County for a day, the most recent daily case rate of about 42 per 100,000. You can see our dramatic increase in cases in Lake County beginning in mid-June. State followed a similar trajectory, but stayed below 40 per 100,000, where we peaked very similar to our winter surge at about 70 per 100,000 the first week of August. And then we've seen it declined and sort of saw a plateau for the rest of the month of August. And now we're seeing a slight decline again. I wanted to share data for the counties that have the highest daily case rate for the week ending September 4th. Just to provide some context, you can see there are a handful of counties that are also in the Northern California region. Del Norte has been experiencing a tremendous surge over the last couple of months, as many are aware of. Shasta County, Butte County also have had some of the higher rates over the summer. Here is the epi curve. Again, wanting to show you the peak of this summer surge the first week of August, and then we saw cases begin to decline. This is also, this first week of August is when the state saw the peak with this surge and have had declining cases like Lake County since then. So for the week that we just finished, the week September 5th through Saturday, September 11th, we've identified about 150 cases to date. This will change as we receive more lab reports and case investigations. Here I wanted to give you an update on Lake County COVID deaths by month as of September 3rd. So here we can see since July of 2020, when the first COVID death occurred, ranging to August 2021. The peak for deaths was in January of 2021, where we also saw the greatest number of cases, and that declined to 0 COVID deaths in June 2021. And then we saw 4 deaths in July 2021 and another 12 in August 2021. Since this graph was produced, we've reported 4 additional COVID deaths. Yesterday, the hospitals in Lake County reported 14 COVID hospitalized patients. You can see this is higher than the impact on our hospitals. This surge has been quite significant, has been greater than we saw in the winter surge. And yesterday they reported 4 COVID ICU patients. Again, you can see an impact beyond that as what we saw in the winter surge. And lastly, just want to share the latest data on vaccination status among eligible Lake County residents, so residents who are 12 years of age or older. And nearly 58% of eligible residents are fully vaccinated. About 1 in 3 remain unvaccinated, but we are seeing some slow but steady progress towards reducing the number of people who are unvaccinated. So there's about 18,500 eligible people right now who are unvaccinated. About 1 in 2 are people 18 to 49, about 1 in 2 people 18 to 49 are unvaccinated. About 1 in 4 adolescents 12 to 17 are fully vaccinated. And we've seen some progress, some great progress among people 50 to 64. Nearly 4 in 5 are now fully vaccinated. But we still see the older age group, those 65 and older, really has been the line has been flat. We haven't seen much improvement in terms of vaccination coverage in the older age group. And I stress that because about 7 in 10 of the deaths in Lake County have been among people 65 years of age or older. So it's particularly important for that age group. The graphs below show you the latest data on the 7-day average of people receiving their first dose of the vaccine and people receiving their last doses or becoming fully vaccinated. And so what we hope to see through the fall and winter is this line continue to increase upward as people get their second dose and become fully vaccinated. That's the update for this morning. Thank you very much.
Right, so as I say, a lot has happened. Focusing on the positive, I love seeing that graph of people being vaccinated going up. It's a really, really positive thing. We now have a mobile van working in the county to help vaccinate people. So people that didn't have access before can get access. As Sarah mentioned, the case rate per 100,000 peaked up around 70 and it's down to 42. 42 is still very high, but it's coming down. On the downside, we have seen 20 new deaths in the county since this big surge that began in June. Spoken differently, 25% of the mortality that we've seen in the county since March of 2020 has come in the last 8 weeks. And I fear that with current hospitalizations, there are going to be more deaths. And I want to emphasize that each one of these people has a family who is grieving right now. In my work as an ER physician, I see this day in and day out. Patients are isolated from their families because of the infection control restrictions. Patients who sadly die without their loved ones present. These daily scenarios are heart-wrenching. And I walked into the ICU on Sunday to discuss a critical case with an intensivist. And there were the intubated COVID patients, all in their isolation rooms with nurses present caring for them. It's heartbreaking to see so many people on vents fighting for their lives, suffering without their loved ones. I think so oftentimes we see numbers, but we don't really put the numbers with what is actually happening to people. To the nurses, doctors, and frontline personnel who are working hard every day, I say thank you. And to those families who went through this or are going through this today, you have my deepest sympathy. 90% of the patients who died were not vaccinated and thus represent deaths that were preventable. And although we have given hundreds of vaccines in the past 8 weeks, we still need to see that line keep going up and get those 18,500 people vaccinated. We can vaccinate our way out of this pandemic, and it really is the only path that we have. So I know that many who are listening to this presentation are not vaccinated and not really interested in getting vaccinated. And it is to you that I address my comments today. I think it takes us all working together to get through this. I believe we can all agree on some basic goals of how to control this pandemic. I think we all wish to save as many lives as possible while suffering the smallest amount of morbidity. And we all wish to prevent the overrun of our institutions of healthcare. And we would all like to keep schools open so our children can learn and thrive in person. And we would all like to see our businesses kept open and successful. So how do we do that? At the beginning of the summer, we were struck with the Delta virus that many thought at that time we had already passed the worst part of the pandemic. I wish we were past the worst part. Unfortunately, the Delta virus, as you all know by now, is a completely different beast. So much more infectious than the mother virus was. Unfortunately, Lake County residents were hit hard. Our hospitals were filled by the end of July, and they remain very, very busy. There is much that is not understood about the surge and the decline of COVID infections. We've seen across the globe that when it strikes, the infection rate goes through the roof, and then 2 to 3 months into the surge, a decline occurs. This was how it behaved where it first came out in India when they had their terrible surge last spring. The same occurred in the United Kingdom, and that is what we are witnessing in Lake County today. We had that surge, and the numbers are coming down. The surge is tapering off, but unfortunately in India and the United Kingdom, the number didn't return to the same low baseline that we had in April and May. And the question in my mind, is that going to happen in Lake County as well? Will we go back to the low infection rates we had in April and May? If we don't, that's really dangerous because we're likely to have other surges that will follow this, particularly with the holidays coming. This means that with all the hospitals working at maximum capacity now, we have few beds for those incoming patients. And this creates a huge problem. It means the routine emergencies that used to be absorbed into the hospital and cared for in an expeditious manner can no longer be cared for in that way. Many elective surgeries have had to be canceled. This is not unique to Lake County, but it's seen all over the country. When we were plagued with wildfires, we were told what we could do to curb the threat of losing our homes. Cut the grass, trim up your trees, clear 100 feet away. These preventive measures might save your sanctuary. Well, in the case of COVID-19, it's the unvaccinated population that is the human wood the virus can still burn through. And the unvaccinated are the main human reservoir in which the virus can propagate and spread. It's not the only reservoir. We are seeing that vaccinated people can be infected as well, but they rarely get severely ill and rarely require hospitalization. Greater than 90% of those hospitalized are not vaccinated. And greater than 90% of those who have experienced death were not vaccinated. Those that have been to the local EDs or have been hospitalized will tell you that the system is busting at the seams. I saw a recent letter written by the medical staff from Sutter Hospital in Lakeport pleading with all those to please go get vaccinated. I realize that most of you are young who may not get very sick, but some will die, as we have seen and will continue to see. An alarming trend seen across the country is that many children are also being hospitalized and that the number of child deaths is rising. This is probably because of the sheer volume of infections that we're seeing with the Delta virus, and probably not the result of increased virulence. But as more and more children get sick, we will see some that do become critically ill and require hospitalization. This is why it is crucial that everyone in that reservoir get vaccinated for our children. I am a big supporter of keeping schools open for in-person learning. There's a mandate that all students must wear a mask while in school. I realize many are not happy with this mandate, but outbreaks in schools are not something that we can tolerate at our level of hospital occupancy. Such outbreaks would likely lead to the true rationing of healthcare, as we are seeing in different parts of the country right now in Idaho, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, just to name a few. We haven't really discussed the quality of masking, because masking in itself is very, very important, but the quality of masking is equally important. Not all masks are worn properly, and not all properly worn masks provide the same protection. When the pandemic began, we encouraged all to use cloth or surgical masks and save the N95 or KN95 masks for the healthcare workers. We have overcome the shortage of the N95 masks, and they are readily available online and in many stores that sell healthcare supplies. A properly fitting mask that has 2 straps and seals around the mouth and nose will give you a much better protection than a surgical mask or a cloth mask. Any mask that does not cover the nose and mouth, I call these chin diapers, lend no protection. So I want to talk a little bit about what the health department is doing to fight the pandemic. As I mentioned, we have the mobile vaccination van. It vaccinated 138 people at the fair. We're looking to use the van to vaccinate at school sites, farm worker communities, and homebound patients. And I encourage all to please take advantage of this resource while we have it. Doing contact tracing, we're focusing on the skilled nursing facilities, schools, and shelters. We have 10 contact tracers. We still have too many cases to trace them all, and that's why we're focusing on the skilled nursing facilities, schools, and shelters. Overseeing testing, there's no longer testing being done by public health, but there are fixed sites and mobile sites that are working around 12 hours per day throughout the Lake region. As you probably are aware, we had an outbreak at the jail, I believe 76 cases, 13 of which are still active. It seems that that's coming under control. We can speak more about that if you wish. Epidemiology, as you saw the careful report that Sarah gave, we're collecting and analyzing the data to more accurately assess how to best proceed in our fight against the Delta virus. So in my full-time job as an ED doc, I ask most every patient I see if they have been vaccinated, and if they are not vaccinated, I ask them to explain why not. I have had many meaningful conversations as a result. Perhaps the most common reason I have heard is that people are busy with work, with family, and they haven't gotten around to it. People have to get around to it. It might be that they don't want to tell me why they haven't been vaccinated, but we've never had a vaccine that's safer than this one. We've never been more confident that promoting such a vaccine as these mRNA vaccines. There's been over 300 million of the vaccines given in this country, and not a single attributable death to the mRNA vaccines. If you are not vaccinated, please make an appointment with your primary care doctor to discuss the benefits of the vaccine. With the current surge with the Delta virus, all unvaccinated individuals are in grave danger of a serious infection. Although our numbers have dropped, the circulating level of COVID-19 Delta virus is still very, very high in our community. This is a smart virus that is looking for a host to infect. Just as forest fires look for wood to burn, the virus is always looking for a body to infect. For the levels of circulating virus, it will find you if you are in the community and not properly masked. Some people are holding out thinking that they will be covered by the herd immunity as we approach larger numbers of people being vaccinated. This was something spoke about early on in the pandemic, and we thought that if we could reach 80% vaccination rates, that we would have herd immunity. Unfortunately, with this virus, it's very unlikely to happen. In Israel, where over 80% of the people eligible for vaccine have got it, they are still seeing surges amongst the unvaccinated, and those surges are overwhelming their hospitals. The infectivity of the Delta virus is very high and will find you if you're not protected by the vaccine. It may find you even if you are protected by the vaccine, but the likelihood of illness requiring hospitalization or leading to death is 10 times greater without the vaccine. I want to make a special plea to also protect some of the most vulnerable in our community: pregnant women, the elderly, and children. Throughout the state and nationally, we have seen a number of unvaccinated pregnant women become infected and ultimately die of COVID. Such a tragedy. Some of these women have had emergency C-sections before death to try to rescue their unborn babies. If you are pregnant and not yet vaccinated, please call your obstetrician or provider today to discuss vaccination. Vaccination is strongly recommended by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology during all trimesters of pregnancy. As Sarah mentioned, there's still a significant percent of people over 65 who have not been vaccinated. Regardless of how healthy you are in grave danger of risk of serious illness from the Delta virus. The majority of people who are dying are still elderly. Please make an appointment with your doctor to discuss how best to protect yourself. And finally, children. Many are asking how they can get permission for vaccinating their children under 12. Unfortunately, we don't have such a vaccine. Maybe by the end of the year we will. Although with the mother virus, we did not see many children infected. This is not the case with the Delta virus. As a result of the increased number of infections, we are seeing increased numbers of hospitalizations. In areas where vaccination percentages are low, we're seeing the ICUs for children overrun and overloaded with COVID patients. If you have children under 12 who have a chronic illness or are immunosuppressed, you should call your doctor and discuss with them how best to protect your child. If you restrict their world to interacting only with those who are vaccinated, they will be safer. They should wear well-fitting masks and preferably N95 masks. They should not be in school if there are active cases identified. When I leave this meeting, I will go back to the emergency department and continue to treat all those who present themselves. This message is to those who are not yet vaccinated. If you're a fence sitter and haven't yet decided what you want to do, please make an appointment with your doctor today to discuss it. It could save your life. If you're one of those who just won't consider a vaccine, I urge you to talk to those who have survived an ICU stay or to those that have lost a loved one. The process is absolutely awful, and the suffering goes on for days, weeks, and sometimes months. The virus starts with a sore throat or malaise, then comes the headache and the fever, sometimes to 103 or 104. This is followed by severe fatigue and myalgias, vomiting, diarrhea. By day 7, you're coughing and starting to get short of breath. By day 9, you're gasping for air and making poor decisions because your oxygen level has dropped so much that your brain is not getting what it needs to think. Somewhere between day 10 to 12, you're so sick that you can't move, you can't eat, and you require everything to be done for you. Your respiratory rate is so fast you can't speak more than a few words at a time. We put you in the hospital, but you have to say goodbye to your family. You go on a ventilator to breathe for you. You're sedated, such that you can't communicate with your loved ones. You're fed through IV lines and tubes, and other tubes control your elimination. In the best of hands in our county and the counties in the Bay Area, only about 25% survive on the ventilator. Your family suffers with you, fearing that you will not survive. Their fear is well-founded because this is all preventable if you're unvaccinated. So please, please vaccinate. I'm sorry to paint such a graphic picture of what it's like to be ill with this virus, but seeing it day in and day out, it's really difficult. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Evans, and thank you for the work that you do on the front lines. I know it's a different picture to see and experience than to watch the news or just be involved in these discussions. I know that I have not seen that. I have been to the hospitals to discuss it, but with HIPAA compliance, only those that are allowed in the areas are allowed. And sometimes I wish that there wasn't that HIPAA so we could really give a glimpse as what it's like to experience that, because I think that until we have that personal experience, whether it's through ourselves, a family, or a friend, that some people don't understand what exactly is happening behind those doors in our ICU departments, in our emergency rooms. And it is saddening that it continues to happen. And that, as you said, our percentages of those that are experiencing that are unvaccinated are still as high as they are. Just keeps proving the point that there is one way to ensure and reduce greatly, not ensure, but reduce greatly the potential risk of what this virus could do to either one of us. So thank you again for your words.
Yeah, and I want to say each vaccination is a win. You know, it's one at a time. So for those listening that have family members who are reticent, you know, please work on them because you can save their life.
Thank you. Any comments, Supervisor Pyska?
Dr. Evans, I also really want to thank you for your work on the front lines and also for your work in Kenya. And it must be really difficult to contrast that's happening there with the lack of vaccines, with the availability that we have here and the privilege that we have with that. So I have a question about testing. We have availability of a lot of home tests and rapid tests, but those tests those test results don't really make it into our reporting system. And so I feel like there is a vagueness with our reporting because we have this out there. And so I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts about that. And if people are coming down with the symptoms, should they do the home test? Should they get the PCR test? And just more about your thoughts on that.
So there are home tests, many of which are antigen tests. Some of those have a higher false positive rate than the PCR tests. So the PCR tests are still the preferred test. You know, we're doing a lot more testing than we did. Testing is a really good thing. And throughout the state, the counties in the state are doing more testing than we are in Lake County. You know, if you don't test when you're symptomatic, you're not going to know whether you're infectious. So if you're not feeling well, or if you were exposed to a active case, test. And it doesn't matter which test you use, but test, and you have to stay away from others until you get those test results back. And that goes for everybody, including myself. I had friends over for dinner and they brought their 21-year-old daughter, and she was not symptomatic that day, but the next day she was. And lo and behold, I had to go down and get my test. And you should get the test 3 or so days after you're exposed and quarantine during those 3 days.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further from Board of Supervisors? I do want to highlight some of the data that was provided. We are seeing a slow and steady, and we'll take it, or decrease in the percentage of our community that is unvaccinated. Of course, that is only our 12 and over population that we are currently looking at, since those are the only ones eligible for the vaccination. But that increase gives me hope that we will see a reduction in our hospitals in the future. It's unfortunate. What we do hear about is coming out of Peru and Brazil is that there's potentially another variant coming through. And I believe as of yesterday, it was just stated that it has hit every single state here in the United States. So we'll see if that one becomes the top variant, or if the Delta will continue to be so, which in my opinion, I hope it continues, because we seem to slowly, as you said, we've hit a bit of a dip, and maybe we will continue to see it slide down. But it's just that the variants are there. They are coming out, and the best way is to protect ourselves and be as cautious as we can. And that includes, and we haven't necessarily talked about it a whole lot today, though you did mention masking, but that also includes social distancing. Making sure that you give yourself enough room. That doesn't mean you won't enjoy yourself. I know that I went to a football game on Friday, and it was very easy to be able to space each other and say appropriately in a very safe and cautious way. And so I think that we just need to continue to be mindful and cognizant of what we're doing, what others are doing, and to be on the defense and move if you have to, or put on a mask if you have to, if you're outdoors as well. And in my opinion, while I hate the mask, I don't know anybody that loves it. It is a simple thing to do to be able to reduce the potential of getting infected.
You bring up a good point, and that, it's large gatherings, even outdoor gatherings, funerals, celebrations. Wear your mask at those events if you're around people that aren't in your bubble. And the amount of virus in the community right now is every bit as high as it was at the peak back in January. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are infectious that aren't symptomatic. And that's why this is so crucial to wear your mask if you're not able to social distance.
Right. Thank you very much. And last comment before I go on to Supervisor Simon, I will ask people, please respect the rules and regulations that individual agencies or businesses request of you. I know that I'm going to use the word appalled, that there are signs everywhere at the football game for everyone to mask up, and yet I'd say about 90% of everybody in the stands were not masking up. Would you light up a cigarette right on a school campus when the rule is you're not supposed to smoke? We need to follow the rules of the properties that we step onto, or don't step on that property. I feel that there's a lot of disrespect in the rules that are being asked and requested of us when we go onto someone else's property, and we would expect the same if somebody came onto our property on how they should behave. And so I just want to put it out there. I know that it can be a bit of an annoyance to have to follow those rules, but you should not disrespect the people whose property you are going on to because you don't like the rules. Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation today. What I wanted to focus on today and just see if we had either Denise or someone on the phone just to talk about where you can get the test now with the mobile clinics that are around the county, and also any vaccination sites too with any of the mobile clinics that are going around. So I don't have that readily. I do know some of the places, but if we could just get that information out one more time. It's kind of the second week we've been rolling it. I know that a lot of folks are doing what they need to do as far as testing and also looking for those facilities in each district. It is being well used because they have it coming out to them instead of having to look for something. So I just want to highlight that. And Denise, if you could just put that up, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. It's on our public health website, and it gives all of the vaccination clinics around the county, days and times, and the vaccines that they're providing. There's also another sheet that provides all of the testing sites.
And once again, where can you find that information on your website?
It's on our public health website for the county, and it says vaccine and testing. You click on it, and everything appears up. They can also always call they also can always call the health department, or our Mohawk line is still in effect, and our Mohawk email is still in effect. If anybody's having difficulty finding a location or signing up, we're happy to help.
Thank you.
And can you provide that contact information for the Mohawk right now?
It is, oh my God, if I can remember, it's 707-263-8174, and it's Mohawk, MHOAC, at lakecountyca.gov.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further comments or questions before we open it up for the public? All right, let's go ahead and open it up for the public. We're going to start with Julia Bono. And again, please give us your name and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Thank you. My name is Julia Bono. I have spoken to the board before on the subject and wish to preemptively remind the board and its medical advisors today that any move to mandate proof of vaccination for any type of public activity is an unconstitutional and preposterous impingement on individual freedoms that probably has much more to do with control than with public health. Furthermore, mandates are not properly legislated laws subject to debate and public input, so they should not be enforced as such. Also, any bribery, propaganda, or other forms of psychological and material coercion that may be used to induce your constituents to take what remains a recently developed medical procedure without long-term trials or informed consent about the side effects of the medical procedure and its ingredients before being administered with it remains unethical. Such actions would clearly violate the 1947 Nuremberg Code, which states that the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable them or him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. Coercing your constituents to take COVID vaccines could even be considered a crime against humanity, of which every member of this board could be culpable if even one individual is harmed by such pressure measures. Those harmed could take legal action that each of you in the county may have to bear the substantial costs of. I do not approve of you taking this substantial financial risk on behalf of this county. I also want to draw attention to the very problematic nature of the vaccine's rollout. The suppression of viable COVID prevention and treatment options by the WHO, CDC, and mainstream media outlets allowed pharmaceutical companies to ram through, peddle widely, and profit massively from experimental vaccines that notably failed to produce real immunity and appear to have caused substantial harm and even death to many individuals, according to the CDC's own VAERS database. Now, these vaccines and new booster shots are being actively promoted in a fear-mongering manner, despite similar risks even to pregnant women and children, as we have just heard Dr. Evans do. These large drug companies and their medical establishment mouthpieces have basically been given carte blanche to spread substantially unfounded fear about this viral disease that is relatively mild in the vast majority of cases, to suppress news about vaccine harms and alternatives, and to promote and perform unethical experiments for profit on a large segment of the ill-informed public with their insufficiently tested injections. I find it inexcusable that Lake County's Board of Supervisors and its medical advisors have been forcefully promoting and facilitating this scheme in our county. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Elaine Zacher.
Hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I have a question and a comment. The data Dr. Evans speaks of is for vaccinated and unvaccinated. In which group do the vaccinated fall if 14 days have not elapsed since their last shot? If those who received the vaccination but have not reached the 14 days are counted as unvaccinated, wouldn't that hide any cases or hospitalizations that result from vaccine injuries? According to the VAERS system, the VAERS reporting system that you can find on the CDC website, many of the injuries and deaths occur hours or days after receiving the shot. Only if there are three groups, unvaccinated, partially vaccinated, and fully vaccinated, would differences between unvaccinated and partially vaccinated be evident. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll get to the answers and the end of public comment so that Dr. Evans, I see that he is writing down some stuff as we speak. And so we'll get to those at the end of the public comment. Lisa Pavlov, you're next.
My name is Lisa Pavlo. I live in Clear Lake Oaks. Week after week, we hear of people in the community commenting before the Board of Supervisors with unfounded, just misinformation. And I just wanted to speak out today because I think what gets missed are all the people in your community who are just keeping their head down and doing work, and they're masked and they're vaccinated. And I wanted to just give the experience of my family this summer as just, you know, comment. My husband had an exposure. He visits clients in his home. He is vaccinated. He masks. He received word on a Thursday that somebody he met with, a couple he met with, also masked and vaccinated, tested positive on Wednesday. And on Monday, after the Thursday where he found out, he went to the Lower Lake testing site. He got tested. And on Wednesday, he found out he was negative. So the masking worked, even though he was inside and definitely had a close contact exposure. However, he lost work. He was out for 6 days quarantining. And so just for that reason alone, I would like to see spread in the community reduced. Secondly, my daughter graduated from college in May, and a month ago started teaching kindergarten in Contra Costa County. She has 27 students, 5 years old, can't be vaxxed, in her morning block. She has 28 students in her afternoon block. In the county that she's working, they have about an 80% full vaccination rate, but she serves a school that has a lot of low income and underrepresented kids, community kids. And none. She's had no COVID in her class, and her school has not had an outbreak. They may have had 1 or 2 kids in the school, but it got handled. As a vaccinated person, she's tested once a week. Unvaccinated staff in her school are tested twice a week. Next is my son. He has worked at fast food in Yolo County in Davis all summer. He has also not been exposed. He is masked and he is vaccinated. So what I want to do, and me, I have gone to physical therapy. I mask and vaccinate. Also, I had an exposure. I got a same-day appointment for, I didn't have an exposure. I was symptomatic. I got a same-day appointment at Robinson Rancheria on a Saturday, and it was easy. I got tested, I was negative, it was fine. The last thing I want to say is about the whole rights argument. There is no absolute right to individual freedoms in this country. I know that because I sat in law school in a constitutional law class for a year, and I got tested on it a lot, and that's just a myth. So I just wanted to add that in conclusion. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you very much. Next comment is phone 1113.
Yes, hi. This is Dr. Will Tuttle in Valley Lake, and I have to say, really appalled at the fear and the deceptive nature of the way that this whole thing continues to be rolled out here, not only in Lake County, but in California and nationwide. And as you know, I've been speaking up because, quite honestly, it is very unpleasant to listen to all this and to keep speaking. But I only do it because, as a citizen, I care, and I feel that we have to see the other side of this. And some people have talked about these facts in prior weeks, but the fact that people are testing positive, most doctors, they don't know what's going on in the lab. They send something out to the lab and it comes back and it's positive. They don't look, they're not trained to find out what the amplification rate is being used. And we found out that the amplification rates are different. For people who are vaccinated, the CDC mandated a 25 amplification rate, which basically will not test anybody positive, and they still have a 35 to 40 amplification rate for people who are so-called unvaccinated, and so they get found out to be positive a lot more. So as Mark Twain said, there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And these statistics are being used to take away our rights. This is the whole thing is a pretext. I think there's a lot of people that understand that here in the county, and they're not speaking up because they know it's kind of, in their mind, they feel it's pointless to try to bring it up here. But I just think we have to realize there are very highly qualified epidemiologists, virologists, and vaccinologists who have studied this in depth and who are being brutally censored in the media and by the AMA. And so if you listen to some of them, I mean, for example, Dolores Cahill, who's very well respected from the Max Planck Institute, she basically says, and many others are saying the same thing, that this is a very dangerous vaccine. She's predicting that within 2 years, 90% of the people who have taken the vaccine will be dead. Mike Eden, who is the former vice president of Pfizer, again, he knows this industry inside and out. He's not quite so harsh. He says within 3 years, 85% of the people who take the vaccine will be dead. So we are talking about a genocide. And even though it's being covered up brutally, we're seeing already there's more people being killed by this vaccine than ever in history. There's no comparison. So for someone to say, especially someone in authority, a health authority, say that we know this vaccine is safe, is beyond ludicrous. All the tests that were done on animals for decades before this, on this type of mRNA technology, the animals all died from antibody-dependent enhancement, it's called, where they get a cytokine storm because their own immune system attacks them. All the animals died, so they could never really go to human trials because it would be unethical. So now we've gone to human trials on the whole world population, and people are dying in record numbers. There's whistleblowers coming forth saying that the CDC numbers are grossly underestimated. There is at least 45,000 and probably a lot more have died. Some are saying it's over 1 million have died, and it's being covered up by hospital administrations, by the AMA, by the CDC, the World Health Organization, because as I've been saying, the World Health Organization and all these agencies have been co-opted and bought by the pharmaceutical, medical, chemical complex, which is vastly powerful and controls the media. And so I'm not getting paid for saying any of this. You folks are getting paid. The media is getting paid.
3 minutes are up if you can finish.
Thank you very much. So I'm just saying I really hope that you will listen and look behind the curtain and protect people, because that's your role. Protect us from the state and federal level. You're the local people to protect us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Carlos Bono.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
First, I want to draw attention to the VAERS data on the CDC's own website, which indicates 675,593 adverse COVID vaccine reactions that include 14,506 deaths and 88,171 reports of serious injury as of September 3rd, 2021. My own sister took the Moderna vaccine and was hospitalized with a heart attack caused by a blood clot 4 days after the second shot, and she almost died. She subsequently had to retire from her job and is on 4 medications and has had to make considerable lifestyle changes due to her weakened health. I'd also like to point out that the so-called COVID-19 vaccines do not work well because they do not provide immunity, they do not prevent transmission, they do not cure the disease, and they simply mitigate the severity of symptoms in those who take them. This is proven by the overwhelming number of breakthrough cases in highly vaccinated countries like Israel, where more than 75% of the population is vaccinated. Because of the injection's inefficacy, the CDC recently decided to weaken the definition of vaccine from a product that actually produces immunity to, quote, a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases, end quote. Now I'd like to address this PCR test, which has been the standard for diagnosing COVID since it was introduced in February 2020. Use of the PCR test to detect the SARS-CoV-2 virus will be suspended by the CDC in December of this year, apparently because a test is preferred that can detect and distinguish between COVID and influenza infections. Interestingly, influenza infections have virtually disappeared in the US, with about 700 deaths in the 2021 season versus 22,000 deaths the previous season and 34,000 deaths the season before that. The PCR test is therefore obsolete, will soon have its emergency use authorization withdrawn, and was never intended to diagnose an illness, according to its inventor. Regarding the FDA's approval of the Pfizer Comirnaty vaccine, the approved vaccine has not even been produced or distributed yet, so for all practical purposes, the FDA has approved a unicorn that remains a non-existent fantasy. The Pfizer vaccine people will still be getting today remains experimental, especially for younger people. So do the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. I'd also like to add that none of these pharmaceutical companies are asking their people to get vaccinated. There's all the postal workers are also exempt from vaccination, and so are the workers of Congress and their staff. So this double standard exists in our culture, and it's disgusting. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Phone 2689.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
This is Christina Robertson, and there's so much to respond to here every week, but I hear almost every week, I hear the word misinformation when someone speaks to COVID-19 solutions that are contrary to the mainstream narrative. This word misinformation, as well as other designations, are designed to frame an idea in such a way as to encourage dismissal of an idea or thought and to discourage honest investigation. This is called contempt prior to investigation. Someone has called that. So those aren't my words, but they're good ones. Contempt prior to investigation. Our only hope for this pandemic is an early treatment protocol. Vaccines are not working. Vaccinated people are still transmitting the virus. There's just the scientific debate has basically been shut down because people are being ignored, and just what somebody said, they're just not being listened to. Now I also want to talk about personal experience. Personal experience is not evidence. While valuable, it's just not evidence. So people who have worn masks, been exposed, not gotten sick, that's not evidence of anything. Many people have chosen to never wear a mask or receive a vaccination. They've also been possibly exposed, and they did not get sick. So personal experience is not evidence, although it is valuable. I myself had a client call me and tell me she trusted this. She got her vaccination, and after her second vaccination, she developed pneumonia, went to ER, and the long and the short of it is she's on oxygen for the rest of her life. She had some health issues, some serious health issues, and some specialists. But she didn't have anything wrong with her lungs. So now she's on oxygen for the rest of her life. That happened the day of the shot, the second shot, Pfizer. She wound up talking to 3 of her specialist nurses. These 3 nurses also had adverse reactions. I asked my client, have you reported this to VAERS? And she said she didn't even know what VAERS was, which a lot of people don't. So I'm pretty sure that there have been many adverse reactions not reported. The 3 nurses that she spoke with after her experience also had problems. They're having problems with breathing, not as severe as hers. Hers is a totally 100% tragic response. But the 3 nurses all had adverse reactions. And I am done. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We're going to go with Ahava Rose. Since Elaine Zacher has already spoken, we'll get back to you, but let's go with new voices first.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors and Mr. Evans, who is orchestrating an embarrassing abomination of healthcare.
Would you please provide your name? And that's Dr. Evans.
Have a rose. And I am just here to reiterate that never has there been a coronavirus vaccine that's completely eradicated a virus. So of course you're going to see this over and over, and you're never going to see an end to this. And, you know, if people want to be safe, we need to start teaching people how to be healthy. If people want to administer effective medicine, we need to start actually doing science and looking at both sides of the spectrum and looking at the overwhelming evidence that ivermectin stops the virus. I also want to say to Ms. Pavlov that I have freedom and liberty as granted to me by my sovereign creator. And it's not in the legal fictional world that you will find my freedom, but my freedom is not a myth. The other thing that I want to say is that I have had this virus. I do not cover my airways and rebreathe my toxins. I will never have a vaccination, ever. And I'm not afraid. And I trust my immunity. And as the judgments come out in all the law cases, the lawsuits being filed against public health officers and chief health officers across the world, asking for an isolation of this sample, your souls will find judgment as you further the propaganda of this globalist narrative. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And it looks like the last of the hands went down. It must have been an accident to have the hand up. And so let's go ahead and bring it back. Dr. Evans, I know there was at least one question rather than just rhetoric and comments. Want to see if we can possibly get an answer for that.
Yeah, so first off, I wanted to reiterate that this isn't an experimental vaccine. This isn't a recently developed procedure. This is a vaccine that's been in the process workings for decades. And we are so incredibly fortunate to have such technology readily available to us, having worked in countries where it's not. It's been approved by the FDA. It took a long time to be approved. The FDA has very strict criteria. And it is a safe vaccine. The CDC does have a website where anybody who gets a shot can call or get online and report their reactions, the VAERS website. One should know that there's no restriction on reporting there. So there are many, many reports, and the serious ones are all followed up on. And you know, when you have hundreds of millions of people who are getting a vaccine, within hundreds of millions of people, in any given day, some are going to die. And the statistics that have been looked at by the CDC have not put anyone who's been vaccinated with an mRNA vaccine to account for their death from the vaccine. So a lot of the information that's being put out there by some of the people who spoke is exaggerated. And Dr. Tuttle, I don't know what kind of doctor you are, but when you talk about fear mongering, you know, I see some of your comments as very disrespectful to those who have suffered so from this pandemic. And I just want to say that this isn't something that's being made up. You know, this is a pandemic like we've never seen before in our lifetimes that is threatening the whole world. It's not just Lake County. It's not just California, the United States. It's around the world. This isn't something that's made up. And if the people who are thinking that it's made up could experienced what we see when we treat these people, you would understand that. The question came up about how vaccinated versus unvaccinated people are being registered. I think people, Denise can correct me if I'm wrong, but until someone has immunity, they're counted as an unvaccinated person, and full immunity is 6 weeks after they receive both vaccinations. Yeah.
That is correct. The way that we've been explaining it to people is it's 14 days after your second vaccination. So that equals about 6 weeks, but some people do take longer to get their second vaccine. Sorry. So it's 14 days past your second vaccination.
Thank you very much. Do appreciate that. And just thank you for bringing it up. I think it needs to be at least stated from time to time. Anytime somebody says that they're a doctor in a conversation of public health, it can get confusing. I know that Will Tuttle's doctorate is a PhD in education, and I'm sure that he rightfully deserved that PhD, but does not make him an expert in the medical field of public health or virology. Just want to make sure that's stated. We did close public comment, and I saw a hand pop up, 4627. Please, we are running a little bit behind today. Please, next time, make sure to put your hand up before we close public comment. But there was definitely a vast opportunity for you to put your hand up. We're going to be moving forward today. Email us your comment or be back here again next week, as we will be discussing this as usual in the coming weeks, just to keep people posted as to what's going on. Are there any further comments or questions from the board to Dr. Evans or just in general?
Dr. Evans, I want to thank you again for coming. And we really appreciate your perspective and your experience. You know, and we have had 20 people die since the beginning of July, and we've mentioned them here before during our meetings. They are friends, they're families, they've left families behind. This is a tragedy for our county. And I really appreciate your sensitivity in reminding us of that and your experiences day to day in your work in the trenches with this. So thank you for coming and being part of our conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evans, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're going to do, if board members and staff don't mind, we're going to take up item 7.2 real quick, since it's, well, maybe not real quick. Would you prefer taking a break and then hitting 7.2, or taking that one on right now? Looking at the board.
I'm trying to do it right now, since it's...
Okay, my plan was to take 7.2 and then take a lunch.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and open up 7.2. Consideration of video content encouraging vaccination in Lake County and approval for distribution via our county website and social media channels and any other available media outlets. So this was something that I originally thought about back in the early days of the pandemic, about putting out a video to ask people, please mask up, help us out. That was something that I retracted because it just didn't feel like the right timing, didn't feel like it was the most appropriate thing at the time. But then as we started looking at what's happening now with the new surge and the fact that we have a tool at our disposal and that some people are not yet using that tool to help reduce the potential for hospitalizations and death, which is what we're aiming for here. It's impacting our entire community when there's a lack of beds. Just to let you know, hopefully I'm not saying a bit more than I should, but I know that we've had ambulances wait 3 to 4 hours at our emergency room because there are no beds to put people in, to the point that they were stuck and couldn't go out to another call because they still had a patient in the back of their truck. They had set up a gurney on the side of the hallway in the emergency room to place those patients there. They were not admitted, but at least it freed up the ambulance to go back out and be able to help serve the rest of the public. That's the kind of situation we're seeing that is not a regular type of situation that we would typically see on an everyday basis unless there's some sort of tragedy or huge incident that occurred. But this is a continuous issue in our hospitals. And we know from the numbers that we see, sometimes in the 90% quartile or sometimes higher, that the majority of the people hospitalized, large majority of the people hospitalized are unvaccinated, and an even larger percentage of people who die from COVID-19 are also unvaccinated. This is not an idea of forcing anybody. This is, we care about you and we want to see you and the rest of our community that needs our healthcare facilities to be available for the care they need. We want to make sure that we can reduce the burden as much as possible. So I put together the idea of putting the video together, sat down with our CAO who allowed to use Matthew Rothstein and also Sam Houston, who helped me out tremendously, both with the script and with the invitation to getting a lot of people to take part in this video. Very proud of the video that is going to be premiered to all of us in the county today. Really want to thank Sam. I think he was a standout person in this concept and in this project. I find it that it's not often that we have a vision of something and what is created is way further ahead of what that vision was. Sometimes our visions are impractical or unrealistic, but he took it to another level, and I can't appreciate the work enough that he has done for this video. And so I would like for us to take a look at the video, unless CAO Hutchinson has something to say before we start. And so Matthew Rothstein, if there's a way for you to please go ahead and share, or however it was set up.
COVID-19 has affected all of our lives.
We have lost beloved family and friends far too soon.
Some of us are still struggling
due to the long-term effects of COVID-related illnesses.
Our businesses were shut down.
The way we work has forever changed.
Our children miss precious time with friends.
And month after month of classroom instruction.
Cases recently surged again in Lake County.
Our hospital beds were full, with many admitted patients struggling with the complications of COVID.
It grows increasingly difficult to find regional placements
for people needing a higher level of care.
We need your help so this doesn't happen again.
Wear a mask when you're indoors with people outside of your household, and make sure it's form-fitting and you have a good seal.
This very simple measure can be life-saving, but we each have to do our part.
The vast majority of people hospitalized with COVID-19 have been unvaccinated.
Help our healthcare workers.
Limit your risk of severe complications.
Help keep our schools and businesses open.
And reduce opportunities for the virus to mutate by getting vaccinated.
Click the links below this video to learn more.
And talk to your doctor if you still have questions.
Get vaccinated.
Do it for yourself.
Do it to keep your friends and family safe.
And most of all,
do it for your community.
My name is Bruno Sabatier.
Dr. Diane Page. Tina Scott.
Scott Knight.
Angela Cuellar Marroquin.
Brad Rasmussen.
Jessica Paiska.
Jeffrey Thomas.
Carrie Hollenbeck.
E.J. Crandall. Ernesto Padilla.
Ana Santana. Dr. Paula Danda.
Moke Simon.
Russ Kramer.
Dirk Slotin.
Jim Steele.
Luisa Lopez Acosta.
Becky Salado. Monica Rosenthal.
Mireya Turner.
Brock Falkenberg.
Annette Lee.
Voris Brumfield.
Pastor Shannon.
We are all vaccinated against COVID-19.
Please join us. Together,
we will get through this.
I'm not sure how everyone's video was. I know my internet said it was unstable for a second there, but just know that it's perfectly smooth when you see it normally, not through Zoom. I know Zoom can sometimes agitate video play. My goal was to get a good cross-section of leadership within the county, leaders from the past, leaders from the present, leaders of the future, to really connect with our community with the message. And the message is, we need your help. It's not, again, a forceful mandate. It's not a forceful request. It's, we need your help. And we are looking to make that change so we can all move forward. And this is about protecting the public. This is about public health and how to move forward. And this is the best tool that we have at our disposal to make things happen. So I want to thank everybody that was a part of this video. Again, I think that the video is absolutely well produced and well put together. I want to thank Angela Cuellar and Luisa Lopez Acosta for helping with the translation, as we have the subtitles in Spanish. And I know that also Sam Houston is working, since we had, I believe, 25 people that we had involved in this video recording. He's working on some other similar videos, but with more specific groups of people within. My goal, again, was diversity. And what I love from this video is it really exhibits the diversity within our community. And I'm actually I'm very proud of the work that was done. And again, taking that vision to the next level. And so I'll leave it at that for any comments from supervisors, and then opening it up for the public. All right, hearing none, let's go ahead and open it up for the public. Any comments from the public on this item? Carlos Bono.
Would you guys be against my making a video to counter yours?
I am not going to abridge your freedom of speech to do what you want on a daily basis. So
would you present it? Would you present it in one of these meetings so that the other side of the argument can be heard?
No, I will not.
Okay.
And Kuchin Gary Thomas.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
If you could speak a little bit louder. It was difficult to hear you last time. I want to make sure everybody hears you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I liked the video. It was really, short. I wouldn't say short and sweet, but it was well thought out, and it probably took a lot of time to put something together. And it's just really simple. The message is really simple. We need the help. We need everybody to get together. Not just the supervisors, not just public health. It's just a world global thing. The entire states, everything. It's just, we need to come together. I wear a mask every day when I'm out. I know I hate wearing it, but it's just simple. It's just a simple thing. Just wear a mask, and it's not that hard. But the people that make it difficult, it just makes it more complicated. So, good video to all of you guys that participated in that. That's all I got to say.
Thank you for your comment.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing no more public comment, let's go ahead and bring it back to the board. We are looking for approval of the video to be dispersed through our website, social media, and other media outlets. That is the action on this item.
So,
Supervisor Pesca.
I'm grateful that we put this together. I know all of us believe in this message, and I move that we approve this video to be released on media and social media outlets.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Pyska and a second by Supervisor Simon. And before we do roll call, CAO Hutchinson, you have your hand up.
Yes, my question could wait until after you're done, though, because it's about the distribution of it.
Okay. So Johanna, roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon.
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall.
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska.
Yes.
And Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Thank you.
And CAO Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The owner of Lakeport Auto Movies reached out to myself and also to the Health Services Director and offering to put up any promotional video like this on their movie screen for viewers at no charge to the county. And so the Health Services Director has suggested that this might be a great place to share this video. Does that sound like a reasonable place, a way to use it? I mean, among others, it'll be out on social media and in other places, but what do you think?
100%.
Great.
And I'm getting nods and everything else from supervisors, so I think you have consensus from the board.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to the movie theater owner for reaching out. That's awesome. Really appreciate that. Okay, so that ends item 7.2. We are going to take a lunch break. It is 12:18. Let's go ahead and meet back up. Let me take a look at the rest of the agenda to see how much more time we need. I think we can meet back up at let's do 1:20. That way, exactly 1 hour.
Thank you.
We'll see you back here.